The girl accidentally shattered the magic orb. The man she had secretly loved for a long time suddenly appeared on her bed. He was naked and tightly bound. This had to be madness. How had she somehow become a kidnapper? The amount of information was too overwhelming, and Vivian fainted on the spot. Ever since that ball, Vivian had fallen in love with Grand Duke Glenn at first sight, and from then on, she fell head over heels and began a long, unrequited love. Throughout 7 years of secret longing, she preserved every image of the Grand Duke on canvas. If she had asked an artist to paint thousands of portraits, people would definitely have thought she was crazy. Her secret love had long since approached obsession. Even her room was like heaven, with portraits of the Grand Duke hanging in almost every corner. Even the body pillow on her bed had his face printed on it. Every time she returned to her room, she felt spiritually healed. She even wanted to live like this for the rest of her life. But her parents kept arranging marriage prospects for her. Not wanting to get married, she shouted, "I don't want to get married." Just then, her friend Marina walked in. Feeling sorry for her, she asked how long Vivian planned to keep pining in silence. Vivian wanted to spend her whole life doing things related to the Grand Duke. "You're not thinking of ending up alone, are you?" "How would I end up alone? I still have my younger brother Cashin." But her brother had once said that he was already disappointed in her. Marina said she was going out for a while, so she handed her bag to Vivian for safekeeping. She even specifically warned her that there was a very dangerous item inside and that she must not open it. Marina was a mage studying at the academy in the imperial capital, but because her hometown was far from the capital, she was staying with Vivian's family, who were close to her own. As Vivian flipped through Grand Duke Glenn's photo album, she found herself unable to focus at all. Curiosity drove her to want to open the bag. She felt that Marina always treated her like a child and would not even let her see the slightest dangerous thing. Just taking a quick peek and then putting it back properly should be fine, right? But the moment she opened the bag, with a bang, a gust of air burst out violently. Even her book, Grand Duke Merchandise, was destroyed. Since she had caused the mess herself, she was too embarrassed to call the servants to clean it up, so she could only hold back tears and clean up the mess on her own. Just then, she looked down and saw a black glass orb. She picked it up and stared into it for a moment, and then froze completely. She had to hurry and put it back into the bag, but the moment she turned around, she somehow tripped over her own feet and fell straight to the floor. The glass orb in her hand slipped out as well, and with a sharp crack, shattered on the ground. A strange aura instantly spread through the surroundings. She gradually lost consciousness too, and her memory stopped there. It was not until she opened her eyes again that the Grand Duke opened his eyes and said, "What's wrong? Aren't you going to continue?" "I was rather hoping you would continue, Miss Vivian Louise." Vivian panicked. "Your Grace, you've been kidnapped right now, but with a body as small and weak as mine. How on earth did I manage to kidnap the Grand Duke, a master swordsman, and on top of that, bring him all the way onto the bed? Shouldn't he be roaring? How dare you kidnap me? You must have a death wish instead." At 21 years old, I had somehow become a kidnapper. It would not be long before the royal investigators found this place, would it? And when they walked into my room and saw all this, they would definitely say that the room was covered in portraits of His Grace the Grand Duke. It was enough to make one's skin crawl, and the ending was easy to imagine. Grand Duke Glenn chuckled softly. "But why do you look so sad? There's no need to be so upset. Come here, Vivian." Only then did she realize that the Grand Duke's hands were still tied, so she hurried forward in a fluster to untie him, her heart full of guilt. "I'm truly scum. I actually harmed the Grand Duke's noble body. Even his beautiful wrists had been rubbed red by the bindings. It was all my fault," and tears slid down onto the back of her hand. The Grand Duke patted her head and comforted her. "It's all right, Vivian. This little injury is nothing." Her face instantly flushed crimson, and she explained in a panic, "You've been kidnapped right now, and I'm the kidnapper." But the Grand Duke only smiled and teased her, saying, "Actually, I think being tied up is not so bad. If you like it this way, Vivian." Blushing, she said, "Your Grace." The Grand Duke responded gently as well, "Yes, Vivian." She was completely dumbfounded. They had clearly never exchanged a single word before. Why was the Grand Duke calling her so intimately? This was bad. Could it be that when I kidnapped him, he hit his head and damaged his brain? She politely raised her middle finger and asked, "What number is this?" The Grand Duke answered, "That is 1. Correct answer. Then, Your Grace, what is your full name?" "Lennox Arbidian Glenn." If he remembered it that clearly, then why was he being so docile? He even seemed to be rather enjoying the situation. Was that just my imagination? The Grand Duke lowered his head and asked gently, "Vivian, didn't you say that you wanted to leave me a complete mess?" She gave a light cough and hurriedly said, "I didn't." But the Grand Duke stepped closer and closer. "Didn't you say that from the first moment you saw me, you wanted to do this?" The Grand Duke took her hand and lightly placed a kiss on it. Vivian instantly blushed and her heart raced, while her mind became a complete tingle. Only then did she realize that the Grand Duke was in her room, which also meant that he already knew the truth that Vivian had secretly loved him for 7 years. The Grand Duke bent down and gently kissed the back of Vivian's hand. What would the Grand Duke possibly think after being tied up in a room filled with portraits of himself? He would definitely think he had been kidnapped by a stalker. Could it be that the Grand Duke was only pretending to cooperate for now, waiting to lower her guard before turning the tables on her? Sensing that things were going badly, she hurriedly explained that all of this was absolutely a misunderstanding. But no matter how she thought about it, what she had done to the Grand Duke was far too shameless. She had actually tied him up and even wanted to do something so outrageous to him. Yet the Grand Duke seemed completely unconcerned about the situation before him and even leisurely poked at the full-body pillow printed with his own image. Vivian racked her brains, trying to figure out how to explain that she had not done it on purpose. The old her had only thought that being able to quietly watch him from afar was enough, as long as she left him with the impression of a polite, gentle, lovely lady. That would have been enough. But now she had suddenly become a kidnapper, and even she could not make sense of it. Why had things developed into such a mortifying social disaster? Gathering her courage, she began explaining the kidnapping to the Grand Duke. I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. Just now, I accidentally broke a strange glass orb. Vivian had no idea what that thing was actually supposed to do. She had never been in love before, and when she was still immature, she would always fantasize about falling in love with His Grace the Grand Duke. But as she grew older, she gradually came to her senses and began to face reality. She knew very well that His Grace the Grand Duke was not someone a young lady of ordinary birth like her could ever desire. Vivian could not help but wonder whether, deep in her subconscious, such an evil desire had really been hidden there all along. And could that black glass orb have been the catalyst that turned desire into action? If this matter were found out by her parents and her younger brother Cashin, how shocked they would be. Grand Duke Glenn broke the silence. I understand, Vivian. She had just breathed a sigh of relief. When she heard the Grand Duke begin to explain what had just happened, she thought he truly understood, so she nodded repeatedly, unable to keep herself from marveling inwardly. Even though the light around them was so dim, he still looked so radiant. His Grace the Grand Duke was just far too handsome. The very next second, the Grand Duke followed up by asking, "How am I supposed to believe what you said? For all I know, these could just be lies you made up after kidnapping me." She froze at once and hurriedly denied it. Many noble ladies admired His Grace the Grand Duke. If they found out about this, she would definitely be ostracized in high society. She might even be branded a kidnapper and spend the rest of her life in prison. Although she was always saying she did not want to get married and that she would spend her whole life being His Grace the Grand Duke's fan, deep down, she still hoped for an ordinary happiness like everyone else, and it was precisely because she liked His Grace the Grand Duke so much that she painted portrait after portrait of him and filled her entire room with them. She had never harmed anyone. If she could, she truly wanted to turn back time to the moment before she opened Marina's bag. Curiosity really did kill the cat. Vivian still could not hold back her tears, and the Grand Duke gently wiped them away for her, then pulled her into his arms with concern and said, "Don't cry anymore. There, Vivian." He lowered his head and gently patted her back. Buried in the Grand Duke's embrace, she whispered, "Your Grace, why are you still being so gentle with me? Your Grace, you still think I'm a kidnapper after all, don't you? But I really didn't mean it. But you really did kidnap me, didn't you?" In a slightly coquettish tone, she explained that it had only been an accident. It was all that black glass orb's fault. The Grand Duke rubbed her head and said as if soothing a child, I know. She turned her head away in dissatisfaction and said, "I'm serious. Do you think this situation is amusing?" The Grand Duke hugged himself innocently. "How could this be amusing? I'm absolutely terrified. Vivian actually kidnapped me. He said it was all caused by that magical item. In the end, this was only an accident." Vivian had never imagined that the Grand Duke was actually the slightly mischievous type, and despite that face of his was still unfairly beautiful. The Grand Duke looked up and asked her, "Vivian, what should we do now? Before long, my knights will probably burst in here. When that happens, you'll have no choice but to be taken to prison." In despair, she hugged her head and crouched down. The Grand Duke took hold of her hands. After helping her to her feet, he looked up at her and said, "It's not as though this matter can't be resolved. You just need to become my lover." She lowered her head and looked at the Grand Duke with tearful eyes, and the moment their gazes met, she still could not help but marvel that His Grace the Grand Duke's eyes were truly so beautiful. She asked cautiously, "Do you mean that I should become your lover?" The Grand Duke answered firmly, "My beloved." She could not believe it, so she asked again. The Grand Duke patiently said, "Would that not be acceptable?" But Vivian misunderstood what he truly meant. In her understanding, a lover was neither a fiancé nor a partner, but only someone one dated temporarily. That kind of relationship was simply too heartbreaking. His Grace the Grand Duke was the only great noble in Irbidia's empire. Not only did he possess half the empire's territory, but he was also beyond the interference of royal authority and held immense power. And for a Grand Duke like him, whose power and wealth were second only to His Majesty the Emperor. It was naturally impossible for him to marry the daughter of a minor count like me. There were even rumors that His Grace the Grand Duke would enter a political marriage with a princess from a neighboring country. Would that not mean that what awaited her was the miserable ending of being discarded after a brief relationship? The Grand Duke asked her, "Are you willing to be my lover?" So in a situation like this, it really meant that the matter had already been decided, and all she had to do was give her answer, right? The Grand Duke knew very well that she could not possibly refuse this proposal, because if they wanted to smooth over the matter of the Grand Duke being kidnapped, then saying that the two of them were lovers did indeed sound like the most reasonable explanation. An idea suddenly struck her, and she thought of having Marina testify about the black glass orb. But Marina did not come from any powerful family either, so whether the chief judge would believe her testimony was still a question. In the end, it seemed that this was the only option left, so she agreed to the proposal, but the two of them had to sign a contract. In other words, it would be a contract relationship. As long as they signed a contract, they would be able to end the relationship cleanly later, without any trouble. And they could also agree in advance on just how far this relationship was allowed to develop. Although His Grace the Grand Duke certainly did not look like the kind of man who would harbor improper thoughts or do anything beyond kissing, it was still better to be careful in everything. Though I know His Grace the Grand Duke is so handsome, who knows whether deep down he might actually be very wicked. Leaning against her legs, the Grand Duke said pitifully, "So what Vivian means is that you don't want to seriously have a relationship with me?" She felt that for her to have such thoughts the very first day they had ever interacted like this was simply far too sudden. The Grand Duke said innocently, "That's true. After all, Vivian was the one who suddenly kidnapped me. Then how long are you planning to set the contract for?" She casually said 6 months, but when she saw the Grand Duke's expression darken, she wondered if that was too long. Then 4 months? Yet the Grand Duke looked even more displeased. "I'm sorry. Then would 2 months be all right?" The result was that the Grand Duke simply turned around and stopped speaking. Could it be that she had misunderstood, and that the Grand Duke did not actually like the idea of a contract relationship at all? At that moment, the Grand Duke turned around and said in a low voice, "1 year." He took her hand and looked at Vivian with deep affection. "Let's sign for 1 year." She was still hesitating, wondering whether 1 year would be too long. But the Grand Duke felt that anything under a year was too short. He stared at Vivian, tightened his grip on her hand, and said, "Then swear it." Even if they were only contract lovers, this was still something very important to both sides. So the two of them solemnly swore an oath before the gods. "I, Vivian Louise, I, Lennox Glenn, will become lovers for the next year." The Grand Duke affectionately patted her head and praised her. "Good girl. Vivian did very well." She simply could not understand why the Grand Duke was being so courteous to her. The Grand Duke bent down and said, "After all, we are now in a romantic relationship, so from now on, I will also treat you well, out of respect." She gave an awkward laugh. "So that's how it is. You really have thought it through carefully." And just at that moment, the Grand Duke suddenly added, "Of course, you are my adorable Vivian after all." She instantly broke down. This was far too embarrassing. Had she heard wrong? He had even gone so far as to declare possession. No matter how she thought about it, it had to be because the Grand Duke had breathed the air in her room, and that was why he had become abnormal. She had never imagined that the air in her room could be dangerous to this extent. With the tip of her foot, she quietly swept the air around the Grand Duke away. The room was filled everywhere with portraits of His Grace the Grand Duke. A scene like this was inevitably rather shameful, so she could only say, "Then what should we do now? It's already so late. It would be better for you to go back early." The Grand Duke looked at her and said, "That's true. Then what should we do now? Should we continue what we were doing just now?" Vivian panicked instantly. She could not remember at all what exactly she had been doing just now. But the Grand Duke's shirt had already been taken off, so there was no need to think about who had done it, was there? And yet Vivian merely tilted her head and played dumb, refusing to admit anything. No, that was not quite accurate either. Strictly speaking, it had not been taken off. It had been torn off directly. The Grand Duke pointed to the tattered clothes on the floor. Only then did she notice the nearly rag-like remains of clothing scattered on the ground. At a complete loss, she crouched down, having no idea how to explain the scene before her. The Grand Duke walked up to her and said affectionately, "If Vivian likes it, then even if my clothes are torn and taken off, I don't mind." She still could not get used to why His Grace the Grand Duke was being so gentle with her. Vivian seemed completely unaware of how serious the situation was. She still naively thought that this was merely a privilege between lovers. But our Grand Duke had originally been the cold and aloof type. Otherwise, how could he possibly have such a cringeworthy title as the Icy Noble Prince? In Vivian's impression, he was not someone who smiled often, nor should he have been as gentle as he was now. Ever since earlier, she had been very concerned about what the Grand Duke would think. When faced with this room filled with portraits of himself, she had even prepared herself to hear harsh criticism. Yet the Grand Duke lowered his head and chuckled softly. Vivian must really like me. A normal person would probably have gotten angry long ago upon seeing a scene like this. Vivian quickly shook her head, trying to fling those terrible guesses out of her mind. She pressed him about just how far physical contact in a contract relationship would go. Would it be hand-holding or hugging, or would kissing be included too? The Grand Duke instead asked her how far she wanted it to go. At first, she thought that stopping at hugs might still be acceptable. But the very next second, she immediately changed her answer to hand-holding, somehow feeling that hugging was still too intimate. After all, this was only a contract relationship, so how could it become that ambiguous? But the Grand Duke interlaced his fingers with hers. Vivian, even if this is a contract relationship, a relationship is still a relationship. We should take it seriously too, shouldn't we? Hugging is only the most basic part. We will also kiss. And then what comes after that? Vivian immediately felt the atmosphere before her turned dangerous. The two of them were both still unmarried. She felt that this was a little inappropriate for the sake of whoever they might later seriously consider marrying. A great noble like the Grand Duke ought to enter a political marriage with a lady of high status. There had never really been such a thing as marrying for love in the first place. The Grand Duke held Vivian tightly and asked in a low voice, "May I kiss you? I want to kiss you. And then do what comes next. Marry me, Vivian." She was completely stunned. Had they not just been talking about something else? Why did it suddenly feel like the plot was spiraling out of control? There was clearly something wrong with this guy. The look in the Grand Duke's eyes had also become even more unsettling. She even began wondering whether she should just knock him unconscious with a hit to the back of the head. But in the very next second, the Grand Duke suddenly kissed her, lightly biting her lip. It was not a dragonfly skimming the water kind of peck, but a real kiss in the truest sense, and her heart nearly leaped out of her chest, just like the sort of thing real lovers would do. Grand Duke Glenn pressed Vivian beneath him. While stroking her hair, he gently bit her lips, just like everything that would happen between real lovers. Only then did Vivian suddenly come back to her senses. If this continued, it really would go too far. If anyone saw a scene like this, it would truly be all over, so she hurriedly patted the Grand Duke on the back. After finally breaking free, she gasped for breath, but the Grand Duke looked at her gently and said that one could still breathe while kissing Vivian. Her disheveled appearance instead made the Grand Duke laugh out loud. The Grand Duke lowered his head and kissed her forehead. "Vivian, since when have you liked me?" The two of them looked together at the entire wall in Vivian's room covered with portraits of the Grand Duke, and Vivian simply could not bring herself to say that she had liked him for a full 7 years. In the end, all she could vaguely say was that it had been a long time, and the Grand Duke pressed further. "Then just how much do you like me?" She hurriedly answered that His Grace the Grand Duke was sacred and untouchable to her. For Vivian, perhaps it had first been just a tender and innocent first love, but as time passed bit by bit, the Grand Duke had now long since become a figure of immense reverence in her heart, like a star in the night sky, too distant to be desired. Silently in her heart, she made up her mind that after 1 year, she would definitely sever things cleanly with the Grand Duke and absolutely must not cause him any trouble. But the Grand Duke lowered his head again and teased her, gently placing a kiss on the back of Vivian's hand. "Vivian, I hope you can relax a little more in front of me." Her little face instantly turned bright red. The Grand Duke wrapped an arm around her waist, pressed his forehead against hers, and said with a smile, "Then now, can we go tell your parents that we are officially dating?" Just then, a burst of commotion suddenly came from outside the window. In a fluster, Vivian ran to pull open the curtains. Downstairs, a group of knights bearing Grand Duke Glenn's family crest had gathered. Apparently, they were searching for the missing Grand Duke Glenn. But what worried Vivian more was that the only shirt on the Grand Duke's body had already been torn apart by her own hands. There was now nothing he could wear to go outside. In a panic, she grabbed a scarf. She told His Grace the Grand Duke to wait a moment while she went to find something he could wear. The Grand Duke actually sat obediently on the bed. Vivian could not help marveling inwardly that the Grand Duke actually had such a cute side to him. She quickly found a shirt. Although it was her father's shirt, there was no time to worry about that now. But on the way back to the room, she heard the butlers inside and outside arguing, saying that there was no way their young lady could have kidnapped His Grace the Grand Duke, and that the very idea was utterly absurd. "If anyone saw the Grand Duke sitting on my bed bare from the waist up, then everything would truly be over." Vivian immediately rushed back into the room, and only when she saw that the Grand Duke had not yet been discovered did she finally breathe a sigh of relief. The Grand Duke handed her a glass of water and told her to calm down first. Only then did he leisurely put on that shirt. In the next second, the butler knocked on the door. What was meant to come had come at last. She had to act more righteous and confident, or people would start to suspect something. But when she thought about it carefully, this explanation itself was full of holes. Before even settling an engagement, she had already brought a man into her bedroom. She had originally been thinking that after 1 year, she would still marry an ordinary person. "If this got out, my reputation would be completely ruined." Another urging voice came from outside the door. The Grand Duke gently asked her, "Are you ready?" Vivian, with a serious look, he gave her reassurance. The Grand Duke suddenly leaned close to her face and said in a low voice, "You'll get used to it soon, both physically and emotionally." Vivian instantly froze, cold sweat breaking out down her back. Was this development really okay? Had things already completely crossed the line? Before she could even react, the Grand Duke unexpectedly kissed her on the cheek. Then, interlacing his fingers with hers, he directly opened the door. She could not help thinking that Uncle Butler would definitely be shocked this time. After all, the amount of information was simply too much. Not only would it give him indigestion, it might even make all his hair fall out. "I'm truly sorry, Uncle Butler." Sure enough, the instant the door opened, the butler suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked as though his soul had flown out of his body, and Vivian hurriedly grabbed his shoulders and shook him. She frantically explained that she had not committed any crime, while the butler asked in a trembling voice why His Grace the Grand Duke was in the young lady's room. Vivian had no choice but to force herself to say, "We were having a secret tryst." With blood still at the corner of his mouth, the butler wiped his tears with a handkerchief while beginning to reflect on his own negligence, saying that he had failed to notice all along that the young lady's mental state was not normal. After all, Vivian and His Grace the Grand Duke had originally had no connection whatsoever. For them to suddenly become lovers now did indeed seem suspicious, no matter how one looked at it, even though this was only a contract relationship. Vivian could only firmly insist that she was not crazy. She and His Grace the Grand Duke really were lovers, and the Grand Duke nodded along at her side. The butler loudly demanded, "Miss, then what about your marriage arrangements? Didn't you promise that you would get married this year?" Vivian could only brush him off by saying, "I only said I would consider it." But the problem was that the two families had already begun discussing the marriage alliance a week ago, and Mrs. Portrait had even been sent to the other household. Moreover, the second young master of that family had seemed quite satisfied. Just then there was a click. The Grand Duke had actually torn the doorknob off with his bare hand. With an eerie smile, the Grand Duke said, "The quality of this doorknob seems rather poor." Vivian and the butler both stared at the ruined doorknob. It was iron-plated with gold, and it had even been firmly secured with screws. Was His Grace the Grand Duke really still human, as expected of a swordmaster? She suddenly felt that if she really were to date the Grand Duke, it might actually be something very frightening, as she subconsciously blurted out, "Thankfully, we can break up after just 1 year." What a relief. The Grand Duke's expression instantly darkened even further. "Vivian, what did you just say?" Stammering, she replied, "Your Grace, after 1 year, you'll break up with me, right?" With a hint of teasing, the Grand Duke said, That. I'm sorry, Vivian, but I don't remember." Vivian froze on the spot, her face full of embarrassment, as she said, "Your Grace, didn't we agree that we would date? If you suddenly act like this, it puts me in a very difficult position." Right now, she had to persuade the Grand Duke immediately. Vivian cautiously asked, "I'm His Grace the Grand Duke's lover, right?" She tightly grabbed the Grand Duke's hand. "At a time like this, I can only use my final trump card." Putting on a pitiful expression like a little animal begging to be adopted, she said in a coquettish tone, "Your Grace, please say that you're my lover. Please." In the end, the Grand Duke simply could not hold it in any longer, raised a hand to cover his mouth, and laughed out loud. Vivian could not understand it at all. Was he deliberately teasing her? The Grand Duke placed a hand on her shoulder. "What am I to Vivian?" After hesitating for a long time, she answered haltingly, "A lover, I guess." The Grand Duke revealed that flawless, standard smile of his and said meaningfully, "Then let us be lovers for now." The implication behind those words was clearly that he would decide whether to treat Vivian as a kidnapper or a lover depending on how she behaved. She immediately made up her mind. No matter what, she had to firmly hold on to the position of lover. So she clenched her fists, closed her eyes, and answered solemnly, "Thank you very much." Seeing Vivian like this, so adorable, the Grand Duke really could not suppress his laughter and had no choice but to turn away. Meanwhile, the butler, who had not understood a thing, still had a face full of question marks. Looking at the growing commotion outside the window, she knew she had to resolve this quickly before things escalated. So she took the Grand Duke's hand and pulled him downstairs with her. Just then, the Grand Duke suddenly turned Vivian around. Lowering his voice, he said in an intimate tone, "Vivian, in my heart, you are someone even more important than a lover." But Vivian's train of thought had gone completely off track, and she still firmly believed that the Grand Duke merely saw her as a kidnapper. When they reached the door, she had already fully steeled herself mentally, and the Grand Duke gave her a gentle nod. The Grand Duke nodded to her, and with an uneasy heart, she opened the door. When everyone saw the two of them walking out side by side, the expressions on Vivian's family members' faces were each more complicated than the last. As for the Grand Duke's knights, they immediately flew into a rage. These people really were lying to us. You actually dared to kidnap His Grace the Grand Duke. This is treason. Seeing the situation spiraling increasingly out of control, she could only whisper, "Your Grace, let's quickly explain." Hearts practically seemed to pop up over the Grand Duke's head. "Of course, my dear Vivian." Immediately afterward, without another word, He directly swept her up into his arms in a bridal carry, and she looked at him in shock. The Grand Duke explained calmly, "This way, who would still think I was the one being kidnapped?" On the contrary, with the Grand Duke looking like this, it instead made people feel as though Vivian were the one who had been abducted. The knights watched helplessly as the approaching Grand Duke carried a woman in his arms, and Vivian could only awkwardly greet them. A knight stepped forward and demanded, "Who is the young lady in your arms? Is she the woman who used black magic to kidnap you?" In the Empire, only a very small number of mages who had received the Emperor's permission were allowed to use black magic. Otherwise, the entire family would be punished for treason. Vivian immediately shot back, "What exactly makes you think I'm a black mage? Never mind black magic. I can't even use ordinary magic, and with my strength, I can't even begin to touch swordsmanship." The attendant beside her also nodded frantically. He even took the opportunity to add just how clumsy their young lady really was. But the knight still would not believe it. Someone from the family had already testified that the young lady of this house had kidnapped his grace. Just as he was about to draw his sword, the Grand Duke stepped forward and said calmly, "Vivian Louise is my lover." The moment those words fell, everyone at the scene lost their composure. Vivian's father even stepped forward, wanting to confirm it again. And the Grand Duke said with utmost firmness, "Your daughter is the woman I love." In the very next second, the knight's sword point was actually directed straight at Vivian in the Grand Duke's arms. The Grand Duke pressured him coldly as he demanded, "Lord Blue-Eyed, are you tired of living?" The knight shouted angrily, "Your Grace, you are not in your right mind right now. This witch must have used dark arts on you." The Grand Duke's expression instantly darkened. "How dare you call my beloved a witch? Do you dare take responsibility for your words? And you even dare say that I am not in my right mind? Have you truly grown tired of living?" The knight was completely overwhelmed by the pressure emanating from the Grand Duke, and the sword in his hand fell straight to the ground. The Grand Duke turned and left with Vivian in his arms, and she could not help glancing back. The people around them were all whispering among themselves, and someone even mentioned Princess Eunice. Eunice was the first heir to the throne of the southern nation, the Kingdom of Evren. If the future queen were to propose marriage to the Grand Duke, it would surely bring unimaginable benefits to the entire empire. Thinking of this, she still could not help feeling a little hurt, and the Grand Duke seemed to notice her mood as well. Lowering his head, he asked gently, "What are you thinking about, Vivian?" Vivian brushed it off vaguely, saying that she would tell him later when it was just the two of them. But the Grand Duke said, "Isn't this already time for just the two of us? I know that the most important thing right now is dealing with all this trouble. Sitting in the position of Grand Duke is truly tiresome. But in truth, all I can think about right now is immediately carrying Vivian back to the bed." Vivian was instantly startled. The moment she heard those words, her face flushed and her heart pounded, and even her breathing became unsteady. When they saw the Grand Duke smile at Vivian with such tenderness, the knights behind him began to doubt their own eyes. It was practically like seeing a demon from hell descend with a smile on its face. After that, the Grand Duke brought Vivian along, preparing to have a proper talk with her parents. Looking at the thin shirt on the Grand Duke's body and feeling cold enough to shiver even while wearing her own outer robe, she could not help wondering whether His Grace the Grand Duke was not cold at all. The attentive Grand Duke immediately lowered his head and asked whether she was cold. In the next second, he directly pulled her into his arms. Pressing his forehead against hers, he said gently, "You have to get used to it slowly." Even though Vivian was so embarrassed she could hardly bear it, she simply could not refuse a Grand Duke who flirted so effortlessly. Where some were delighted, naturally others were distressed. The reactions of Vivian's family were absolutely incredible. Watching the two of them seemingly surrounded by pink bubbles, everyone was so shocked that they could not say a word. Yet the Grand Duke himself did not seem embarrassed in the slightest. He really did seem to be naturally fearless in social situations. Vivian's father finally broke the awkward silence. Although he had many questions he was curious about, it would not be proper to leave guests standing outside all this time, so please come in first. The scene shifted. Looking at the Grand Duke, Father could not help asking whether His Grace really intended to keep sitting in that position. That completely unreserved sitting posture, overflowing with embarrassment, really was something only he could pull off. Only then did Vivian, who was sitting on the Grand Duke's lap, suddenly realize it, and her entire face turned so red she did not know what to do with herself. Just as she tried to struggle to get up, the Grand Duke pulled her right back into his arms again. Looking at the smile on the Grand Duke's face, Vivian could not help thinking of her younger brother from the past. It was the same kind of smile Cashin would show when he was bullying her. Vivian could only awkwardly shift her body a little. Father gave a light cough and spoke again. "Let us continue." Father looked at the shirt the Grand Duke was wearing. With tears in his eyes, he said, "That was a shirt I always treasured dearly." The Grand Duke, however, said quite generously that he would wash it clean and return it, and would also send another 100 shirts of the same kind. Sitting beside him, Vivian's attention, however, remained fixed on the Grand Duke's face the whole time. Even an action as simple as drinking tea, he did with elegance, so perfect it was almost unreal. As they continued talking, the topic finally returned to the main point, and father confirmed once again. "So, what your grace means is that Grand Duke, you are seriously seeing my daughter?" And the Grand Duke also said seriously and firmly that he was indeed sincere. At the side, Cashin finally could not suppress his curiosity and asked what exactly he liked about his sister. The moment Vivian heard that, she immediately shot her younger brother a fierce glare. Just what did this brat take his sister for? That was basically naked sarcasm. After pondering for a moment, the Grand Duke answered, "Cute." The moment the word left his mouth, Cashin immediately sprayed out the tea he had just drunk. The Grand Duke continued, saying that if he were to go into detail, Vivian's eyes were cute. The way she blushed when embarrassed was cute. The way she looked when asking others for favors was cute. In fact, no matter what it was, everything about her was cute. Even the tips of Vivian's ears turned completely red. Lowering her head shyly, she could only keep listening as the Grand Duke went on. "Count Louis, do you not think so as well?" Cashin complained with a speechless expression. "Unless it's the day she suddenly faints." Mother immediately pinched him secretly from the side, so he could only hurriedly change his words. "When my sister suddenly goes crazy one day, she's kind of cute too." But for some reason, the meaning of that sentence did not seem to have changed at all. The scene shifted to the courtyard, where the Grand Duke said that he had been very happy today and would send Vivian a letter and a gift tomorrow, as this was merely basic etiquette. But she had been single since birth and had never been in a relationship. So how could she possibly understand such things? She was just thinking that she absolutely had to go ask her friend Marina for advice later. Then in the very next second, her cheek was suddenly kissed with a smack, and the soft touch made her freeze on the spot. It turned out the Grand Duke had sneak attacked her again. "This is a goodnight kiss. Sweet dreams, Vivian." After returning to her room, Vivian grabbed the body pillow printed with the Grand Duke's face and started flailing wildly at it. In her mind, the Grand Duke's words from earlier kept replaying over and over again. His presence even still lingered in the room, and she simply could not believe that she had really become the Grand Duke's lover. The scene shifted to the Grand Duke's residence, where he gently swirled the wine glass in his hand. As he slowly sipped his wine, he discussed with his butler what kind of gift he should send Vivian. He agonized over it for a long time. Vivian seemed to like poetry collections and novels, but giving books as a gift somehow did not feel quite appropriate. As expected, a ring would be better, and preferably one I could put on her finger myself. What about a necklace or a bracelet? But in that case, it would lack the pleasure of my putting it on her with my own hands. Dresses and leather shoes also seemed quite nice. After standing there listening to him ramble for a long time, the butler could only remind him that there was an old saying that if you gave shoes as a gift, your lover would run away. The Grand Duke turned his head and said with complete confidence that Vivian would absolutely never do such a thing, because she likes me too much. After being hit full in the face with that display of lovey-dovey sweetness, the butler tactfully and quietly withdrew. The Grand Duke took out a key and unlocked a locked drawer. Inside lay a book signed with the name Vivi Bunny. As he flipped through its pages, he thought that people who used a pen name like that usually chose something completely different from their real name. One day, I will read it aloud in front of Vivian myself. What kind of reaction will she make then? Just imagining her putting on an expression that begged me to spare her made the Grand Duke unable to stop himself from smiling, and he lowered his head with a soft laugh and murmured, "Vivian, my patience is reaching its limit too." The heart in his chest, still beating restlessly, felt unfamiliar to the Grand Duke. Before meeting Vivian, he would even have doubted whether he truly had a heart at all. His thoughts drifted back to the past. A group of noble young ladies were discussing at a tea party a book that had lately become especially popular. The Grand Duke bent down and picked up the novel that had fallen to the floor. "The Empire's only Grand Duke is actually my lover. Is this a romance novel?" After that, the Grand Duke read out the contents of the book. With an elegant and captivating voice, Grand Duke Lennox said, "The only one in my eyes is you, and the only one I love is you." The Grand Duke turned and asked those young ladies whether they could explain the book to him. At first, the Grand Duke only felt that this romance novel was utterly ridiculous. So, in other people's fantasies, this is the kind of person I am? It truly is hard to understand. Even the knights who respected him most would hold something back in front of him, and yet that author had actually written him as so deeply affectionate. What would happen if I recited these childish and embarrassing lines to her word for word? If the contents of the book really became reality, she would surely become so shy that she would be completely at a loss. Gradually, he began to take an interest in Vivi Bunny. If I found out who she was, how exactly should I deal with this hateful little rabbit? A few days later, he attended a banquet, but remained distracted the whole time. At a glance, Vivi Bunny's handwriting looked very much like that of someone from a noble background. Moreover, she understood noble social customs and etiquette in remarkable detail. The conclusion was already obvious. Vivi Bunny was most likely some noble young lady. The Grand Duke swept his gaze around. If that were the case, then she might very well be here. Perhaps that friendly yet strange gaze I had felt before belonged to her. Although he still could not quite put it into words, there was always a strangely ticklish feeling in his heart. At that moment, after greeting him, a shy young lady immediately turned and fled. The next day, the butler asked the Grand Duke where he was going out to. He could hardly say outright that he was going to look for the person who wrote romance novels about him. Could he? After making inquiries from many directions, he finally followed the clues and found the place. He walked into a small bookstore. Picking up a book at random, he thought to himself that if luck was on his side, he might run into that rabbit here today. If that really happened, then he could catch her on the spot. Just then, a young lady walked over. "Excuse me. Thank you for making way." The moment he saw that young lady's smile, the Grand Duke froze on the spot, his gaze tightly following her. The young lady walked away politely and went to speak with the shopkeeper. From their conversation, and from the stack of manuscript pages she handed over, the Grand Duke immediately realized that this matter had to be connected to Vivi Bunny. Her well-cared-for skin and long hair, the neatly trimmed fingertips painted with nail polish, and that dress which looked understated but was actually expensive. She was definitely a noble young lady. The Grand Duke looked at that face and felt that he had seen it somewhere before. "Your Highness Lennox." Suddenly, the image came to mind of that young lady who always greeted him at banquets and then immediately ran away. At last, he remembered. The daughter of Count Louis, Vivian Louise. The Grand Duke thought it over again and again. Vivian and Vivi Bunny were astonishingly alike. That pen name was far too obvious. It was almost adorably naive. The scene shifted to a banquet. Looking at Vivian, the Grand Duke noticed that she had nearly tripped again. Last time she had also fallen 3 or 4 times. Could it be that her shoes did not fit? But the last time she wore boots, she still fell just the same. Who could fail to like such a thoughtful Grand Duke? Watching her limp along with difficulty, the Grand Duke instead found her oddly adorable. It is also adorable that she used herself and me to write a love story. That alone is enough to make me forgive her. To fall in love as if it were destiny, and then love as if it were a game of house. I really want to see what exactly is going on inside your little head. At that moment, a married lady came over to greet him. The Grand Duke only responded politely, though absent-mindedly. Seeing Vivian enthusiastically piling banquet food onto her plate, the Grand Duke could not help feeling puzzled. Her family surely could not be lacking food, and he had never heard that Count Louis and his wife abused their children. That lady proposed that the Grand Duke dance with her daughter, but the Grand Duke noticed that Vivian had already disappeared from his sight. After politely refusing, he immediately went after her. And he was still thinking, where exactly are you trying to run off to? Even though you twist your ankle every time, you still run rather fast. It's not as if you're really a rabbit. The Grand Duke stared deeply at Vivian. In that enormous banquet hall, she had somehow become the only person left in his eyes. The Grand Duke followed Vivian all the way outside. This was the royal forest. If the patrol guards found them, that would be troublesome. I need to stay focused. There are many dangerous wild animals nearby. The Grand Duke silently followed behind and watched her. He saw Vivian crouch down and excitedly feed a rabbit. At once, an absurd yet novel thought sprang into the Grand Duke's mind. Is this some kind of effort to rescue one of her own kind? It seemed that in the Grand Duke's eyes, she really was about to be equated with a rabbit. Watching Vivian play so happily with the rabbit, the Grand Duke could not help but laugh softly. And just then, the patrol guards approached this area. I think I just saw someone over there. At that critical moment, the Grand Duke immediately stepped forward and drew Vivian completely into his arms. Vivian was still utterly bewildered. Why is His Grace the Grand Duke suddenly hugging me? Just as she was about to speak, the Grand Duke whispered, "Sure." Vivian became even more at a loss. Lowering his voice, the Grand Duke asked her, "Do you know that what you're doing counts as illegally entering the royal forest?" Vivian herself had no idea whether what she was feeling right now should be called excitement or fear. Looking at her like that, the Grand Duke had such a thought for the first time in his life. This is the first time in my life that I've seen with my own eyes a person who has fallen in love. And the person she fell in love with just happens to be me. The Grand Duke spoke again. "It's time to leave here, Miss Vivian Louise." Vivian still had not fully reacted, so the Grand Duke explained it once more, saying that it was time to leave, and Vivian could only awkwardly echo him. Both of their faces were faintly flushed red, and the Grand Duke secretly glanced at Vivian. "Why is my heart beating so fast? Endure it, Lennox. She is still too young." After that, the Grand Duke escorted Vivian back to the banquet. Vivian asked, "Your Grace, do you still remember me?" The Grand Duke replied, "You always greet me so warmly, and because you are too adorable, I have always remembered you." Vivian was visibly stunned. For a moment, neither of them knew what to do, and the Grand Duke gave 2 light coughs. "Then let us return to the ball. Miss Vivian Louise. After thanking him with heartfelt gratitude, she turned and left. The Grand Duke watched her departing figure, suppressing his emotions with all his strength, his hand unconsciously tightening into a fist. Just wait another 5 years. In 5 years, she will be 21. As expected, this really was a long-planned love. Winter arrived very soon. Every day, the Grand Duke would let his gaze linger on the adorable Vivian. In the blink of an eye, 5 years passed, and it seemed that the Grand Duke was finally reaching the limit of his restraint. He repeatedly asked the butler whether there was an invitation to a banquet at Duke Louis's residence, because for the past 5 years, there had only ever been one thought in his mind: I miss Vivian. When night fell, the Grand Duke gazed up at the starry sky. At that very moment, his mind was probably full of Vivian as well. Some things begin to feel more real the more you think about them. Suddenly, Vivian's figure appeared in the distant bushes. The Grand Duke was instantly startled. The ducal estate was heavily guarded, so how on earth had she gotten in? If a guest had arrived, someone should have informed me. So, why have I never received any notice? And when he looked again, Vivian's eyes were vacant and unfocused. Could it be black magic? But Vivian had no talent for magic, so it was impossible for her to have used it herself. That meant she had definitely been used by someone else. Just which bastard dared to cast black magic on my Vivian? Although a dispelling spell could solve it, that would damage her nerves. In a daze, Vivian threw herself into his arms. Even the sound of each other's heartbeats became unusually clear. He forced himself to calm down. This absolutely had to be the last time he endured it. Right now, he first had to figure out what kind of black magic she had been afflicted with. The Grand Duke stared at her vacant eyes. Sure enough, it was an evil, seductive black spell. It was a dangerous curse that amplified the victim's desires and then made them attack a preset target. To think someone dared do something this suicidal to my Vivian. The Grand Duke suddenly thought of Prince Asmodeus. That coward had no courage to challenge him directly. Yet, he always liked using methods like this to threaten me. For using Vivian as the price, I will make you pay dearly, Vivian murmured. Your Grace. In the next second, she suddenly wrapped her arms around his neck and blurted out, I like you so much. Then she burst into tears with reddened eyes. Your Grace, I don't want to get married. He held Vivian in his arms. He had already made up his mind that before long, he would deal with all the families that had come to propose marriage to her. Vivian said seriously and deeply, I want to like you for the rest of my life. The Grand Duke replied in a low voice, Then like me for the rest of your life. Vivian grabbed the Grand Duke by the collar and demanded, How can I spend my whole life only looking at you? I still have to get married. The Grand Duke was still puzzled. But didn't you say you don't want to get married? Vivian sighed helplessly. Life and what one is supposed to do are not the same thing. Your Grace is such a fool. The Grand Duke paused inwardly. Wasn't she under black magic? I see now. She isn't wicked enough to hurt others, so the black magic can't control someone who has no malice. But that still didn't seem right, because her greatest desire was clearly the Grand Duke himself. Seeing the smile on the Grand Duke's face, Vivian immediately demanded, Why are you laughing? Do you think I'm funny? Your Grace is so annoying. Being too handsome is annoying too. Vivian became even bolder. I only want to be the only one who gets to see you. There are far too many people paying attention to you. She even proposed an absurd idea. Then just kidnap me like this and lock me up somewhere, so only you can see me. With an expectant look, Vivian carefully asked, Really? The Grand Duke indulgently replied, You can do anything you want. Vivian found a rope. Please tie this on. The Grand Duke was slightly shaken inside. So, this is what my tastes are like. Looking at how happy she seemed, in the end the Grand Duke could only obediently comply. In any case, with this kind of binding, he could break free whenever he wanted. Vivian held the rope in her hand, and he quietly walked behind her just like that. He asked Vivian, Every time you go to the palace, you do these rescue-your-own-kind activities. Why don't you keep a rabbit at home? As she hummed a song, she answered, Because mother doesn't like them, and rabbits are happier hopping around in nature anyway. After leaving the courtyard, Vivian actually already had a carriage prepared. 1 second, the Grand Duke was thinking there should have been guards here. The next second, he saw 2 knights sleeping like the dead. A frail girl like her could not possibly have taken them down head-on. What exactly was going on? Vivian reached out and took out some candy. I gave them candy. The Grand Duke became even more puzzled. Could there have been a sleeping spell cast on the sweets? Vivian said, At first I thought they wouldn't just eat something from a stranger, but luckily they ate it right away. The Grand Duke suddenly felt a little jealous. He himself had not even yet eaten food personally given to him by Vivian. He had already begun deciding in his mind how to deal with those 2 knights. When the butler saw Vivian arriving together with the bound Grand Duke, he was so shocked he could not say a word. Vivian explained, I'm taking His Grace the Grand Duke back to my house. At that moment, the knights also came chasing after them, and the Grand Duke was taken onto the carriage. I'm being kidnapped right now. Don't follow us. I'll return as soon as possible. Vivian shouted excitedly. Let's go. The butler also cooperated very well. Forget it, Mississippi. I didn't see anything. Just as the knights were about to chase after them, The Grand Duke raised a hand and made a throat-slitting gesture as a threat. "Whoever dares follow us, I'll kill you." The knights became even more bewildered. The scene shifted to Count Louis's residence. With deep satisfaction, Vivian said, "Now the Grand Duke is mine." Following behind her, the Grand Duke replied, "All right, Vivian can take whatever she wants." She excitedly pushed open the door to her room, and the Grand Duke likewise carried a trace of anticipation. But the moment the door opened, what met his eyes were portraits of himself and body pillows everywhere. Looking around again, he discovered that the room was filled almost entirely with things related to him. There was even a life-size body pillow. So, did she hug it to sleep every night? Blushing, the Grand Duke lowered his head. "Heavens, this is really too." Vivian immediately asked what was wrong. At that moment, he had completely reached the end of his patience and had no intention of enduring anymore. He quickly broke free of the rope and swept Vivian up in his arms. Then he pinned her beneath him, and because he did not want her to see him like this, having lost control, he gently buried her face against his chest. There was only one thought left in his mind. Vivian was just too adorable. In a low voice, the Grand Duke warned her, "Vivian, if this keeps going, even I don't know what I might do." And then, in the very next second, Vivian instantly destroyed the mood. "I understand, Your Grace. I'll help you." Then she tied him up again. The Grand Duke fell silent on the spot. As expected, Vivian's tastes were the sort. She said excitedly, "Done. This way, you won't be able to do anything now, right?" Heavens, the Grand Duke, like, this is amazing. I really want to paint this pose too. The Grand Duke found himself rather troubled for a moment. "I hope you'll show at least a little restraint." At that moment, Vivian was trying hard to recall the contents of the novel Marina had lent her. In the next second, with one swift motion, she tore open the Grand Duke's clothes. The Grand Duke was startled by the sudden action. What sort of novel had she read that made her start by tearing clothes off? Vivian's eyes were full of excitement. Somewhat awkwardly, the Grand Duke said, "If you're curious, you can touch too." Without hesitation, Vivian directly reached out, but after touching around, she only ended up feeling his abs. Well, all right. She had definitely overthought things. Vivian muttered to herself, "I see. So these are His Grace the Grand Duke's abs. I can use them as a reference when drawing in the future." She lowered her head, and their eyes met. "Even His Grace the Grand Duke's eyebrows are beautiful. May I kiss you?" Faced with Vivian's sudden flirting, even the Grand Duke began to find himself struggling to hold out. The person he had longed for day and night was right before him now. As a vigorous young man in the prime of life, how could the Grand Duke possibly withstand that kind of temptation? Yet in the very next second, Vivian suddenly headbutt him straight on. The Grand Duke was instantly rendered speechless by that straightforward line of thinking. "Vivian, that's not how kissing works." With a serious expression, she asked the Grand Duke how it was supposed to be done. The little devil in the Grand Duke's heart was finally let loose. "For a kiss, you're supposed to gently bite a little." That was exactly how a pure and innocent cute girl got coaxed along step by a man. After that, Vivian slowly lowered her head and kissed him. Vivian discovered that there was actually a little string stretching between her lips and the Grand Duke's lips. Her whole face instantly turned bright red. The Grand Duke said gently, "That's right, Vivian. Do you want to marry me?" Somewhat dejected, she thought there was no way she could marry the Grand Duke. Father would definitely never agree. The Grand Duke ought to marry someone of equal standing, and only people who were suitably matched could be happy in marriage. But the Grand Duke did not think that way at all. "Vivian, you really should stop tormenting me like this. I want to marry you. I've endured a full 5 years waiting for you to grow up." Looking at Vivian, he said, "That's only the Count's way of thinking. I'm different. You clearly like me. If you marry someone else, will you really be happy?" The moment those words fell, Vivian's tears began dropping patter by patter onto the Grand Duke's face. Pouting angrily, she said, "Lennox Glenn, you idiot." The Grand Duke's expression immediately shifted from tense to radiant. Sure enough, this man's tastes were not exactly normal either. "Vivian, are you calling me by my name directly now?" In anger, she swung her little fists. After a few blows, it was basically like scratching an itch for the Grand Duke. With a hint of mischief, the Grand Duke said, "Are you giving me a massage? It doesn't hurt at all." It was practically like a little bunny waving its paws. Vivian shouted in exasperation, "Of course not. I hate the Grand Duke the most." She completely broke down and had just been about to give up on everything. At that moment, the Grand Duke suddenly confessed without warning, "Vivian, I love you. I don't just like you. I think this is love." For a moment, Vivian had no idea how to describe what she was feeling now. "Your Grace, please don't say foolish things like that." Faced with feelings she had never even dared to hope for, she was so overwhelmed she could barely breathe. In the next second, she fainted on the spot. The Grand Duke lowered his head and looked at her collapsed in his arms. Could it be that the black magic had already been undone? There was even a trace of regret that passed across his face. Vivian's consciousness was in chaos at that moment, yet her hand still rested on the Grand Duke's abs and kept groping around. When she came to her senses, She suddenly let out a scream and accidentally fell off the bed. The Grand Duke immediately looked at her with concern. "You're not hurt, are you?" With her head lowered, Vivian could only keep grinning foolishly in embarrassment. Lying on his side, the Grand Duke asked in a voice laced with flirtation, "Why did you stop?" The flashback ended here. Sitting in the carriage, the Grand Duke made up his mind that even if this relationship had begun as nothing more than a contract romance, he murmured in a low voice, "Break up after 1 year? Don't even think about it. I will never let go again. Just wait, my girl." The scene shifted, and Vivian was hugging the Grand Duke's life-size body pillow, daydreaming all by herself. She was practically drooling, and in her mind, the Grand Duke's goodnight kiss kept replaying again and again. The next morning, Vivian was eating breakfast when her maid Emma asked with concern, "Miss, did you oversleep today?" Looking at Emma's knowing smile, it was obvious that her mind was full of what had happened last night. Vivian suddenly remembered what her brother had said last night. "My sister has gone crazy, but she's cute." In the next second, the food she had just stuffed into her mouth got stuck in her throat, and Emma hurriedly asked in concern. Vivian could only say that she had suddenly remembered a nauseating memory. 1 second, Emma was saying that Miss needed to be more careful. The next second, her thoughts had already flown far, far away. "Miss, don't tell me. Miss, you said you and His Grace the Grand Duke have only been dating for a week, right? Before that, did you and His Grace ever have that kind of relationship?" With a calm face, Vivian said no. Emma continued pressing her. "Do you actually understand what kind of relationship I mean when you answer like that?" Seeing Vivian smiling blankly in confusion, Emma blurted out directly, "Miss, what I mean is a sexual relationship." Vivian instantly reacted. How is that possible? How could the Grand Duke and I possibly do something like that? Seeing how utterly defenseless her young lady was when it came to the Grand Duke, Emma truly did not want her precious cabbage to get gobbled up so easily, so she seriously emphasized it again and again. No matter how handsome the Grand Duke was, or how gentle he was to Miss, you absolutely cannot trust him 100%, understand? Even though Vivian was only giving perfunctory answers, Emma still refused to let it go. "Please repeat after me. You absolutely must not trust men 100%. It was on this day that Vivian received a gift from the Grand Duke. Even the bouquet of flowers was especially similar to her hair color. There was also a letter attached to the gift, and Vivian hugged the envelope to herself in love-struck delight. It even carried the Grand Duke's scent. "This is a letter personally written to me by His Grace the Grand Duke. Even the handwriting looks like a work of art. I'm so happy I'm going to melt." She began to read the contents of the letter. "My dear Vivian, did you sleep well last night? I hope you will like these flowers and gifts. I chose them all while thinking of you. I missed you so much that I could not sleep all night. Tonight, I will come to pick you up, and we shall go on a date. Make your preparations and wait for me, my beloved." At that point, she sat bolt upright. She was so excited that she immediately wanted to share it with her maid. She practically wanted to tell the entire world just how happy she was right now. After calming down a little, she opened the gift box sent by the Grand Duke. What came into view was a dress so gorgeous, it was astonishing. It was covered from top to bottom in jewels, matched with delicate and intricate lace trim. Calling it a work of art would not be an exaggeration at all. Standing to the side, Emma looked somewhat puzzled. How would His Grace the Grand Duke know Mrs. Measurements? No way. Could this be headed in that sort of scandalous direction? Right after that, Vivian opened the next gift box, which was filled with gemstones, necklaces, earrings, and all kinds of dazzling, luxurious jewelry. Just then, a knock came from outside the door. "Miss, it is the butler. Master urgently needs you." The scene shifted, and Vivian came before her father. At this moment, there was also another man in the room, a baron named Evan Harris. Vivian warmly greeted him. He was Lady Rockbell's cousin. Lady Mary Rockbell was the chief steward of Count Lewis's estate. The two were chatting happily when father suddenly interrupted. "Vivian, sit down first. Starting today, you will go away to recuperate, and Baron Harris will assist you from the side." Vivian could not understand at all why father would suddenly make such arrangements. "If that really happens, then I won't be able to see His Grace the Grand Duke. With someone as busy as him, there is no way he would specifically come to Lewis territory just to see me. If I leave now, then our contract relationship really will end here." Vivian silently clenched her fists. She did not want the love between herself and the Grand Duke to end before it had even truly begun. Even though Vivian spoke up to refuse, father brought up the origin of the magic orb she had shattered. She was instantly shocked. She had never told anyone about this, so how did father know? In the next second, Marina walked in. The moment Vivian saw Marina's expression, she felt as though Marina seemed a little apologetic toward her. What exactly had happened? Then Marina spoke. "Vivian, before I handed that foldable bag over to you for safekeeping, back at the school summer camp, I had already felt that Professor was very suspicious. He was always loitering nearby. That person was actually Crown Prince Asmodeus. He is extremely interested in all sorts of strange abilities, such as magic, alchemy, puppet arts, and spirit arts, and he has been searching everywhere for talented people in those fields. Then he recruits them for his own use. He is also an authority on black magic and one of the few people granted permission by His Majesty the Emperor to research it. And that magic orb was most likely tampered with by him as well. The moment it exploded, the bead hidden inside would fall out, then guide someone into picking it up. Only then did Vivian realize it. So his target actually wasn't me, but you? Marina replied. Vivian, your brain is actually pretty quick after all. She immediately puffed up and said, I'm not an idiot. Marina patted her head and said, that man did approach me before and wanted me to help him research black magic, but I refused. So he probably held a grudge ever since and came up with something this nasty. He really went to great lengths just to get rid of me. Vivian frowned and said, but I was the one who touched the bead first, so that's why it broke. Marina said with a smile that in the end, the one who got enchanted was still Vivian, and that she really was a natural-born living relic. Vivian asked suspiciously whether that was supposed to be praise. Could it possibly have been meant as an insult? At that moment, Father gave 2 light coughs. In any case, the conclusion now is that His Highness the Crown Prince is the mastermind, and the Grand Duke has always been at odds with him, while the Grand Duke also seems to like you very much. Vivian had just been about to speak and persuade Father to change his mind, but Father immediately cut her off again. That will not do, Vivian. The Grand Duke is the most dangerous one of all. Seeing Father look so torn, she could not bear to argue with him for a moment. Even though she truly did like the Grand Duke so much, she was nearly mad from it. But it was also true that his reputation was fearsome. The youngest powerhouse, a genius, a battle maniac, cold-blooded and merciless. These were all labels the world had attached to him. Father said worriedly that perhaps the Grand Duke had approached Vivian only to investigate whether their family was colluding with the Crown Prince, and that he might simply be pretending to like her. Vivian could not help remembering the letter and gifts from this morning, along with all those moments yesterday that had been sweet enough to burn. Could all of it have been an act? From the Grand Duke's perspective, if he wanted to find out whether Duke Louis was colluding with the Crown Prince, the most effective way truly would be through me. Even if all of this is real, even if all of this is a lie. But even so, she still did not want to vanish without saying a single word, so she stood up and argued with Father. Father, I don't want this. Father said with equal anguish, you have already been dragged into something extremely dangerous. Right now, the most important thing is to ensure your safety first, my daughter. With tears in her voice, Vivian begged her father, at least let me go say goodbye to the Grand Duke. Father, please, at least let me leave him a letter. But Father said, the Grand Duke would never take such a risk for your sake. Vivian's emotions instantly became unbearably complicated. Is it because ours is only a contract relationship? So that contract had been a trap from the very beginning. Was that it, my beloved? After Vivian finished writing her farewell letter to the Grand Duke, she prepared to leave. Just then, her younger brother Cashin suddenly came running over. Seeing the tear tracks on his face, Vivian was momentarily confused. As Cashin wiped away his tears, he held out something. It's just a charm. Take it. Vivian had just begun to thank him when Cashin suddenly said that all of this was because the former glory of their family had already died. Vivian immediately scolded him. How can you say something like that in front of Father, you unfilial son? Cashin clenched his fists and swore, I will restore our family's honor. I won't let anyone push us around ever again. On the surface, Vivian casually told him to do his best, but Cashin emphasized once more, I won't let those disgusting men touch you. Though Cashin usually loved bullying his sister, in his mind, the only one allowed to bully her was himself. Seeing that his sister clearly did not believe his words, he turned away and huffily tossed out, honestly, forget it. Think whatever you want. The more Vivian stood there and thought about it, the more conflicted she became. Had Cashin taken the wrong medicine or something? At that moment, the coachman was already ready to depart. Sitting in the carriage, Vivian kept thinking about what exactly she was supposed to do about the contract. God, please forgive me for breaking my oath, and please keep His Grace the Grand Duke safe. Please, you must stay healthy. The butler delivered a letter to the Grand Duke. At first, the Grand Duke, who was in the middle of a meeting, did not even want to bother with it. But the moment he heard it was from Vivian, his attitude changed immediately. Looking at the letter in his hand, he muttered under his breath, she even sent a letter over this adorably. We clearly agreed to meet tonight. So could she not wait even that long? He opened the envelope with a smile, but the instant he saw what was written inside, he froze completely. He suddenly clenched the letter tightly in his hand and turned to leave. The people behind him hurriedly asked what had happened. He stopped, turned back with a smile, and said, I'm going to bring back my runaway lover. Meanwhile, Vivian ran into a new mishap. A sudden downpour began, and even the wheels of the carriage became stuck in the mud. Everyone was forced to get out and take shelter from the rain, and Vivian huddled inside the tent, shivering from the cold. At that moment, the coachman took out a glowing bead. Standing there, he explained that Count Louis, Vivian's father, had specifically given it to him. Vivian knew that this must be because father was worried about her. She lowered her head, her eyes reddening slightly, hoping only that her family would all remain safe. After the rain stopped, everyone began setting up a grill and preparing something to eat. One of the knights handed her a cup of hot tea, but Vivian was still worrying about whether the Grand Duke had successfully received her letter. Just then, that knight removed his helmet. Only then did Vivian recognize that he was the reporter she had met at the hunting competition. Before she knew it, 7 years had already passed. Back then, I was only 14. I wasn't like other noble ladies who would personally weave a long decorative ribbon to give to the person they liked. But because I was so clumsy with my hands, I never dared give that ribbon away. Vivian remembered that at the time, he had actually spoken to her first. If that ribbon doesn't belong to anyone yet, would you be willing to give it to me? Because I somehow have a feeling that if I get it, the competition will definitely go smoothly. Back then, she had truly believed him. Thinking about it now, it had probably only been his way of comforting her. As she thought about it, she could not help drifting into a daze until the knight reminded her that the meat was already done. Only then did Vivian happily begin eating the fragrant skewers of meat. Seeing that Miss had finally smiled, the people around her were at last relieved. After that, everyone entered full feeding mode. That night, they stayed at an inn for the night. At last, Vivian finally fell asleep peacefully. The next day, she ran into her uncle. Her uncle introduced someone to her. The smug man before her was called Viscount Alvin, and with a face full of confidence, he greeted her. "Nice to meet you. I heard you are a beauty." Her uncle pressed Vivian down into a seat with one hand. At a glance, it was obvious that uncle was trying to forcibly arrange a blind date for her, but father would absolutely never allow such a thing. That could only mean that this was a decision her uncle had made on his own. After the two of them awkwardly finished introducing themselves, that smug man even winked and blew her a kiss, as though he were very charming. No need to be so nervous. Then I'll just call you Vivian directly, or I could call you by a nickname instead. Vivian suppressed the anger in her heart and had just been about to refuse, but that smug man winked again. "You can comfortably call me Scott too." Before Vivian could even say anything, he crossed one leg over the other and began putting on airs. "Actually, not long ago, a gold mine was discovered in my territory, so now I'm extremely wealthy." Vivian's horizons had truly been broadened. This was the first time she had ever met a man who flaunted his wealth so crazily the very first time they met. Even if the branch family of their house had declined, that did not mean they could be humiliated like this. And looking at Uncle's guilty expression, he had surely gone gambling again and lost all his property. That smug man was still rambling on. "If Vivian marries me, you won't have to wear old clothes like these anymore. You'll wear the most magnificent dresses, and you won't have to suffer in a poor family anymore." At that point, Vivian's temper exploded completely. She directly picked up a glass of water and splashed it in that smug man's face, then warned him with full force. "No matter how poor Count Louis may be, he still hasn't fallen so low as to beg from someone like you. The one who truly wants to beg from you is clearly Uncle. Uncle, you must have gambled away the family property at some casino again, haven't you?" In the very next second, all three of them broke into chaos. Seeing that he could not out-argue her, that smug man simply tried to regain face through force. Humiliated and enraged, he raised his hand and was about to strike Vivian. Vivian hurriedly covered her head and squeezed her eyes shut, but she quickly realized that she did not feel any pain. When she opened her eyes again, what she saw was a perfect hero saving the beauty scene. At that moment, the Grand Duke was gripping that smug man's throat tightly and refusing to let go. Even when the guards who had rushed over stepped forward to try to stop him, it was completely useless. That smug man was practically rolling up his eyes. At last, Vivian cried out, "Your Grace." Only then did the Grand Duke release his hand and look at her. He walked over and gently touched Vivian's face. Perhaps because of her running away earlier, the Grand Duke lowered his head and, though his tone was gentle, said something far from ordinary. "Vivian, from now on, it's my turn to kidnap you." For a moment, she could hardly believe it. Then the Grand Duke leaned close and stared at her with a threatening look as he said, "Vivian, tell me, should I kidnap you?" After seriously thinking about it, she lifted her head and answered brightly, "All right, Your Grace." After hearing the answer he wanted, the Grand Duke smiled as well. He instructed the knights to deal with that smug man themselves, and he casually declared that the family behind him would suffer along with him. In the next second, he directly lifted Vivian into a bridal carry. Pressing close to her face, he softly whispered, "You might feel a little dizzy." Before she could even react, the view before her eyes had already begun to blur. When she opened her eyes again and saw the ceiling above her, she immediately realized that this was not her own room. The moment she suddenly sat up, the Grand Duke happened to push the door open and walk in. What entered her sight was His Grace the Grand Duke, wearing nothing but a bathrobe, and Vivian instantly flushed all the way to the tips of her ears. She coughed twice strategically, trying hard to appear calm. The Grand Duke walked over and asked worriedly, "Vivian, are you all right? You fainted right after I used teleportation magic." Vivian remembered Marina mentioning before that first-time users of teleportation magic would probably be dizzy for about 6 hours. After I fainted, the Grand Duke couldn't possibly have done something indecent to me. Could he? She had never expected that this time, it would actually be the Grand Duke who kidnapped her. The Grand Duke slowly drew closer and took her hand. In the next second, he gently pulled her into his arms. Vivian, do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? She stole a glance at him. It was the first time she had ever seen the Grand Duke wear such an expression. Embarrassed, she averted her eyes and answered softly that she did not feel uncomfortable anywhere. The Grand Duke then continued asking whether she still felt dizzy. Blushing, Vivian said she was already fine. See, could you let go of me first? The Grand Duke deliberately refused to listen, and in the next second, he laid her down on the bed, saying, I don't want to. Just like that, the two of them lay quietly on the bed embracing each other, and she could clearly feel the Grand Duke's warmth and heartbeat. That heartbeat thudded again and again, like a startled deer racing wildly. But I broke the oath and contract between me and the Grand Duke. And I also broke the promise between father and me. Seeing the tears fall from his beloved's eyes, the Grand Duke immediately asked worriedly, What's wrong? Lowering her head, full of guilt, Vivian said, Did your grace receive my letter? She thought to herself that the Grand Duke must be very angry now. In the next second, the Grand Duke's arm wrapped around Vivian's waist. He lowered his head, pressed his face against her shoulder, and hugged her tightly. Vivian, how could you run away like that? Leaning in the Grand Duke's arms, she replied softly, I wasn't running away. It wasn't something I could choose. The Grand Duke frowned and gently stroked her head. You don't trust me? It was you who first proposed that we have a contract relationship. Even though Vivian tearfully explained herself in a pitiful voice, the Grand Duke still only acknowledged her and no one else. Didn't you say you loved me? Without waiting for her to answer, the Grand Duke directly read aloud the contents of the letter. Dear Grand Duke, you are the person I love most in this world. From the moment I attended my debut ball at 14, I was already drawn to you. My being affected by black magic was only an accident, and as you already know, Count Louis was merely being used. Our contract relationship can only end here. I'm sorry for troubling you. After hearing it, Vivian's tears would not stop falling. Choking with sobs, she said, I really like you. You must be happy. Looking at her with heartache, the Grand Duke asked in a low voice, Why do you think I kidnapped you? In a rather foolish tone, Vivian answered, To gather evidence? In the next second, she hurriedly added that the Grand Duke could punish her however he wanted, and that she had nothing to argue for herself, but everything she had written in her heart was true. In a dark tone, the Grand Duke said, Yes, there is no better way to make someone tell the truth than interrogation. In the next second, his hand restlessly moved toward her waist, but in the end, he merely tickled her. Then the Grand Duke pressed her again. Vivian, what did you write in the letter? Stammering, she barely managed to say the words love. The Grand Duke continued pressing the attack. You mean you love me? Adorable Vivian, hurry and say you love me. After she finally gave him the answer that satisfied him, a happy and fulfilled smile also appeared on the Grand Duke's face. In the next second, he immediately pounced on her, hugging her and rolling around with her on the bed as he said that his Vivian was just too adorable. Propping himself up, he kissed her forehead. Every time I see Vivian, I think you're unbearably adorable. I can only look but not touch, and I'm really about to go mad. Do you believe me? At that moment, Vivian suddenly remembered that she had written many romance novels before with the Grand Duke as the male lead. You would actually go mad because of me. Looking at her gently, the Grand Duke said, What exactly do I have to do for you to believe me? Vivian, may I kiss you? Just as the two of them were about to move on to the next step. At that moment, a woman kicked the door open. Lennox, you shameless brat. In the next second, she sent the Grand Duke flying with a kick. This woman was named Isabella, the Imperial Princess, and at the same time the Grand Duke's mother. Angrily raising her fist, she shouted, You insolent brat! How dare you do something like this to such a cute child? Then she immediately crouched down and gently said to Vivian, I'm sorry, I frightened you, didn't I? Seeing Vivian's stunned and shy expression, Mother also became a little flustered for a moment. Heavens, what do I do? This child really looks like she's been frightened. This girl is so cute, she's practically like a rabbit. No wonder she is exactly Lennox's type, and no wonder she stirs up his protective instincts. Then Mother pulled Vivian into her arms and lightly patted her back. It's all right now. It's all right now. Everything's all right. Mother could not help thinking back to how she had just asked her son who this girl he had brought home was. And he had actually said, She's my beloved. Does he even know what the word beloved means? She had never expected her son to bloom so late in love. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. That was why Mother had directly thrown a punch at the Grand Duke. This brat was becoming more and more disrespectful toward his mother, and had even secretly brought back such an adorable girl. Mother clenched her fist, but inwardly, she was overjoyed. My son, who seems like he crawled out of hell itself, actually has a beloved. The existence of this little girl is basically a miracle. Her name is Vivian Louise, right? absolutely have to seize this chance. I must not scare her away. Mother immediately put on a kind and amiable smile. Child, are you hungry? Afterward, Mother even personally helped braid her hair. After being transformed by Mother's godlike skill, Vivian looked even more delicate and adorable. The scene shifted, and they arrived at the dining room. Looking at the dazzling spread of food before her, Vivian felt a little at a loss. Not to mention that seated before her is none other than the imperial princess herself. She was even proud of herself for not fainting on the spot from excitement. Mother took gentle care of Vivian. Don't be so restrained. Go ahead and try this cream of mushroom soup. It tastes quite good. Vivian's eyes were full of admiration, and the moment Mother saw that look on her face, she could not help but pull her into a hug. Heavens, how can such a cute creature exist? Only then did the Grand Duke finally manage to speak. Mother, please let go of her first. Vivian can't even eat properly like this. Watching the way the two of them got along, Vivian found it especially unusual, so natural it was almost like friendship. Back then, before the Grand Duchess and the previous Grand Duke were married, their suitors had already lined up outside the city gates. The two of them must once have been deeply in love as well. Vivian frowned. She felt that she really ought to explain her relationship with the Grand Duke beforehand, but Mother still kept warmly fussing over her. Vivian looked awkwardly toward the Grand Duke and whispered, "Your Grace, what should we do now? Please, Grand Duke, before the misunderstanding gets any deeper, hurry and say something." In the next second, however, the Grand Duke said to Mother with complete seriousness, "Mother, Vivian is going to marry me." Sitting beside him, Vivian had just nodded along in agreement, but after hearing what the Grand Duke said, she immediately sprayed out all the tea she had just drunk. Vivian was completely dumbfounded. Now there was truly no way to wash this misunderstanding away. "No way, Your Grace. What on earth are you saying?" The moment Mother heard it, she also flew into a rage. "Of course you should marry her. You've already gone this far. Are you planning not to take responsibility?" With a dark expression, the Grand Duke said, "I haven't gone all the way. Please don't distort the facts." If the Grand Duke's mother had not suddenly barged in, the progress between the two of them probably would already have gone well beyond this point. Mother immediately pressed him. So, just how far had they progressed now? The Grand Duke rarely showed a trace of shyness, though his gaze shifted a little. The words he said were astonishingly bold. "If I said we had already sworn vows before a monk, would you believe me?" Vivian began questioning life itself. A monk? Did he mean that sort of thing, and then that other sort of thing? Mother covered her mouth and laughed. "So you really are serious this time, Lennox?" The Grand Duke sighed and said rather speechlessly, "Please don't repeat something so obvious twice." Mother also snapped back angrily that sure enough, he was as rude to his mother as ever. Then Mother's gaze slowly fell on Vivian, and Vivian felt her whole body grow tense. The feeling was like a rabbit being stared at by a wolf. In the next second, Mother immediately leaned in excitedly and said, "Oh dear. Did my daughter-in-law get frightened again? How can you be this much like a rabbit?" With utmost seriousness, Mother took her hand, stared at her, and then said to her son, "Now I finally understand why you like this young lady so much." Afraid that his Vivian would be snatched away, the Grand Duke immediately stepped forward and said, "I hope you understand nothing." Then he directly lifted Vivian up with both hands. In a guarded tone toward his mother, he said, "Vivian is mine." Mother wore a broad, knowing smile. "Who's trying to steal her from you? I was only saying she's cute." Someone's jealousy jar has completely overturned. The Grand Duke immediately shot back unhappily. "The way you were looking at her just now made it clear you wanted to take her away." Mother sounded somewhat helpless. "Then where else can she go now? Are you going to lock her up in your room and spend the night together?" The moment those words were spoken, the Grand Duke immediately remembered how she had run away and broken the contract before, and his expression darkened at once, his tone growing heavier as well. Locking her up wouldn't be so bad. Mother could not help sighing inwardly. As expected of my son, his mental state really is rather questionable. After that, the Grand Duke set Vivian down, and she naturally ended up sitting between his legs. Only after she realized it did her entire face instantly flush to the roots of her ears. A sitting position like this had already been one thing when it happened once before in front of her own parents, but now she was actually doing this in front of the Grand Duchess too. It was simply too embarrassing. The Grand Duke lowered his head and met her eyes. In the next second, he swiftly caught both her hands and lifted them straight into the air, saying with a hint of teasing that Vivian like this was always unbearably adorable and made one want to bully her a little. Because that embarrassing pose lasted for a full half-minute, she could only cast a pleading look toward Mother. But unexpectedly, this mother and son were exactly alike. "Yes, she really is far too adorable. Couldn't you at least let me hug her once too?" But did Count Louis and his family know that she was here now? After Vivian's earnest efforts, she finally managed to steer the conversation to the main point. They were contacted 4 hours ago already, and it was also with Vivian's consent. Mother questioned him once again. Did she really have a choice? The only reason she nodded was obviously because she was afraid of you. Hearing that, the Grand Duke's heart gave a sudden jolt. Lowering his head, he carefully asked her, "Is that true, Vivian?" She did not want her feelings to be misunderstood. She immediately explained to the Grand Duke, "No, Your Grace. I did that because I like you." Hearing Vivian personally give him such affirmation, the Grand Duke's heart trembled fiercely as well. From this moment on, there was one more man in the world driven mad by love. Mother said with relief that no matter what, this was truly wonderful, and that Vivian liked Lennox too, didn't she? Vivian was both excited and nervous. Without hiding anything, she confessed her love. "It was love at first sight for me with His Grace the Grand Duke. I have liked him ever since I was 14, and even if all I could do was watch him from afar, that would have been enough. Even if in the end we couldn't get married, that would still have been all right." Vivian's expression gradually dimmed. After all, everything had originally begun from an accident. Mother's sense of justice instantly exploded. With such a wonderful daughter-in-law, there was no way she could fail to bring her home for her son. So she immediately cut Vivian off. "Wait, Lennox, have you proposed?" "I've already decided on this daughter-in-law." From the Grand Duke's expression alone, his determination to marry Vivian was already perfectly clear, and he said firmly, "I will." The moment Mother heard that, she was instantly alarmed and forcibly separated the two of them. Then she launched straight into her son. "What? You brat had better give her a proper proposal. She's already misunderstood things this badly. Have you even seriously confessed to her at all? You heartless creature." The Grand Duke, grabbed by the collar, immediately retorted, "I was just about to have a proper talk with Vivian. Mother, you were the one who suddenly appeared and interrupted me." Mother shouted angrily, "What is that supposed to mean? What I saw just now was clearly you harassing the poor girl all by yourself. Wait a moment, your father will be here too, and then there will be a proper occasion for discussion. Before that, you had better explain everything clearly to Vivian, understand, Lennox?" Mother's string of words had practically already put marriage on the schedule. She looked exactly like someone who wanted them to get married on the spot immediately. Then she gently soothed Vivian again. "I'll go out first then. You two should have a proper talk, child." Vivian, who had barely had any right to speak the entire time, felt only as if a storm had just swept through. The Grand Duke also slowly moved closer to her and sat down beside her. "I'm not going to eat you just yet, Vivian." At this moment, the Grand Duke was both nervous and excited. "Do you know how many years I have already waited for you?" He gently took Vivian's hand and looked deeply into her eyes. "Let's get married." She was utterly moved by those words. In the next second, the Grand Duke pulled her into his arms. "For 5 years now, I have been watching you all this time, holding hands, kissing, getting married. These are all things I have longed for. I can no longer resist this temptation. I truly cannot keep enduring it any longer." She had just been about to speak when the Grand Duke bent down and said in a low voice, "Vivian, listen carefully. The only person I want to do these things with is Vivian." The two of them then kissed each other uncontrollably. That kiss lasted a full 10 minutes, and Vivian was almost kissed breathless. She hurriedly pushed the Grand Duke away and braced her elbow against him. Blushing, she said shyly, "If you don't stop, things really will get completely out of hand." The Grand Duke rolled a shoulder. "Then that must be because the kiss just now wasn't deep enough. Let's try again. I haven't even started properly bullying you yet." Vivian was directly frightened by that bold remark. The Grand Duke explained that after they got married, he would not keep holding back anymore. "You little tormenting temptress." Then the Grand Duke asked her whether she had already forgotten what he had said before the kiss. The Grand Duke knelt on one knee and looked at her with deep affection. "The only person I want to do these things with is you. The only person I want to personally put a ring on here is also you. I love you, Vivian." At that moment, it was as if her heart beat for the Grand Duke alone. She stood there in a daze, emotions so tangled she could not describe them. She thought of her former self, who could only look at him from afar. Every time the Grand Duke hurried past her side, she could not help feeling disappointed and sad. And now, the Grand Duke was telling her with incomparable devotion that all through these 5 years, he had always liked her. Vivian suddenly clenched her fists and covered her chest, trembling slightly. The Grand Duke had liked me for a full 5 years? It was simply too unbelievable, to the point that everything before her felt like a dream. But even so, I am willing to drown in this sweetness. The Grand Duke somewhat nervously held her hand. Vivian asked again, "Len, are you serious?" The Grand Duke looked at her and smiled, then answered seriously, "Every word is sincere. If I keep enduring any longer, I really will go mad. So let's hold the wedding within a week." Faced with the Grand Duke speaking so urgently, Vivian was utterly shocked. "Why, Your Grace? Please calm down first. We should at least get engaged first." But the Grand Duke was so anxious that he immediately said, "How troublesome. Do we really have to get engaged first?" She simply could not withstand the longing in the Grand Duke's eyes and could only turn her face away, blushing as she softly said that everyone got engaged first and only then married. After hearing that, the Grand Duke seemed to seriously think it over. If they got married on the spot, it really would attract quite a bit of criticism. The Grand Duke slowly turned around, his back facing Vivian, and muttered in a low voice that it didn't matter, because he would deal with all those who cast strange looks their way. Seeing the faint killing intent around him, she suddenly realized that this truly was not a dream. Then the Grand Duke turned back around and finally compromised. "Then the engagement ceremony will be held 1 week from now." Trembling like a frightened rabbit, She could only obediently nod. The Grand Duke's gaze was so serious and sincere. She still could not help cautiously asking again whether His Grace the Grand Duke had really already liked her for 5 whole years. Vivian's expression was still full of disbelief. The Grand Duke could only helplessly confess the thoughts he had harbored back then. Thoughts almost like an old ox wanting to nibble young grass. I always wanted to protect you, but back then you were still too young. I couldn't approach you lightly. Now I've finally waited until 5 years later. But even so, Vivian was still incredibly nervous. Marrying the Grand Duke liking me, all of it still felt unreal to her. At that moment, the Grand Duke suddenly took her hand and lowered his head to kiss it lightly. She was startled by the gesture, and looking at unbearably adorable Vivian, the Grand Duke said with a mischievous smile, "Does it feel more real like this, little bunny? Speaking of which, are you still going to keep calling me your Grace? Why not switch to a term of endearment? After all, I did hear you call me Len just now." Hearing that, she felt as though her soul was about to leave her body. Using a pet name for the Grand Duke was simply unimaginable. It felt as if all 7 years of her past admiration from afar had been completely overturned. To give a pet name to the Grand Duke, who was as distant as the stars in the sky, it was practically blasphemy. The Grand Duke spoke up. "Since we're getting married soon anyway, then of course I'll call you Vivi from now on." Overwhelmed by this sudden happiness, she became utterly flustered, desperately trying to dispel the excessively sweet atmosphere around her, her mind in complete chaos. She suddenly remembered the romance novels she had written before with the Grand Duke as the male lead, and that pen name was Vivi Bunny. Like a rabbit that had done something wrong, she hugged her head and trembled. Could Len already have discovered that those novels were all written by me? Seeing her look so troubled and pitiful, the Grand Duke could only take the initiative to lower the difficulty. "All right then, just call me by my name first." So embarrassed, she could barely stand it. She softly struggled out, "Lennox." The Grand Duke instantly looked as delighted as if flowers had bloomed all over him. Reaching out to stroke her head, he said, "My Vivi is such a good girl." Her heartbeat instantly spiraled completely out of control. "I really said his name. This is actually happening in reality." Holding her hand, the Grand Duke continued to press onward step by step. "Good. Then this time, use a pet name." She became even more embarrassed, so flustered that she could barely speak coherently. The Grand Duke even deliberately began acting pitiful to pave the way for life after marriage. "If you're already this shy now, then things will be troublesome later. I've endured for a full 5 years, and I'll continue to endure properly. I'll keep enduring until the day I eat Vivian up." Yet she innocently thought that what he meant was simply the ordinary sort of eating like a wolf chasing a rabbit. But when she thought of the things her maid Emma had repeatedly warned her about before, she still felt, in that instant, a faint belated sense of fear. The scene shifted, and the Grand Duke's mother was drinking tea with a man. And the man before her was none other than the Grand Duke's father, Lucas. Mother sighed, saying, "Honestly, how did I end up having a son like that with a man like you? Even though he looks rather silly, that father and son are completely different in personality. Of course, Lucas also has a sharp side. It's just that he has never once shown that side to me." Father slowly spoke. "So, that child is in our son's bedroom right now?" With a teasing tone, Mother said that the two of them were rather passionately involved. Father thought for a moment. Count Louis's precious daughter. Was it? Just what kind of girl could make Lennox so captivated? Lennox was so perfect that he hardly seemed like a child who had grown up normally. He was good at nearly everything and almost never made mistakes. Because he was too outstanding, he instead never looked at the people around him. He had never truly liked anyone, nor had he ever formed friendships. He had such a frighteningly cold personality. And on top of that, he was a merciless battle maniac. Even the royal knights were willing to admit defeat before him. As his father, and Isabella too, we were always worried whether someone like that could really find his other half. Even in a political marriage, with his personality, the two sides would probably only end up miserable together. But who would have thought that Lennox would personally bring back such a delicate girl? Lucas asked his beloved, "That girl is called Vivian Louise, right? Do you think she truly likes Lennox?" Isabella said excitedly, "Yes, you can tell at a glance how much she likes Lennox. But whether she will continue to like him that much in the future, none of us can be certain. So we absolutely have to hold on tightly to that girl." Once Isabella had completely decided that Vivian was her future daughter-in-law, she directly gathered the whole family together and started a formal conversation. Vivian also never expected that less than a day after being proposed to, she would directly meet the other party's parents. The Grand Duchess immediately entered full feeding mode. She kept stuffing all kinds of delicious food in front of Vivian. Vivian nearly choked from this overly enthusiastic kindness. At that moment, the Grand Duke's father Lucas also spoke. "Don't feel pressured. Just eat whatever you like. This child is far too thin. She should eat a little more." Vivian struggled out a thank you. The Grand Duke, however, asked his mother with obvious displeasure, "Mother, Why is my beloved seated beside you? Mother pulled Vivian into her arms at once and looked at the Grand Duke with disdain. I just wanted to rescue her from your side. What about it? Somewhat helpless, the Grand Duke wanted father to say a word for him too. But Lucas ignored his own son completely. The two parents-in-law fed Vivian one bite after another. Mother said to the two of them, "Child, don't be nervous. Just be as adorable as you usually are." "Oh, right, Lennox. Didn't you have something to say?" The Grand Duke coughed lightly twice. "Even if you didn't ask, I was already planning to say it." The two parents immediately sat up properly and listened. Then the Grand Duke solemnly announced that Vivian and he would hold their engagement ceremony within 1 week. The two had just begun to say, "All right, we." But in the next second, they instantly shouted in shock, "Wait, straight to an engagement." Mother sighed that he truly exceeded all expectations, just as expected of her son. Father, too, was so stunned by those words that he froze on the spot, while cold sweat broke out on Vivian's forehead. If only you knew that he had originally wanted to get married immediately. Mother quickly adjusted herself. "So then, is the ring ready? And what about the wedding?" "No, the engagement ceremony?" The Grand Duke replied, "First, I have already invited the Lewis family, and the ring has already been commissioned. It will be delivered in 3 days." That speed made even Mother suspicious. 3 days. Was that really enough time? But then again, who was our Grand Duke? He had clearly planned this long in advance. He had already begun preparing 6 months ago. This speed at chasing his wife left no one any time to react. Mother could tell that her son was already so impatient he wanted to marry Vivian home immediately, so she could not help growing curious about when exactly he had started liking her. When the Grand Duke calmly said 5 years ago, the parents instantly shouted in shock together. What? Even the servants at the side were nearly startled by the volume. Mother's gossiping spirit burst into flames. 5 years? How is that possible?
I didn't notice a thing.
The Grand Duke asked helplessly, "Is this the sort of thing that must be shown on the surface?" Mother was genuinely baffled. How exactly had her son managed to hide such intense feelings all these years without letting even a drop leak out? Then she had to admit that in this regard, her son truly did have a bit of her old style. At that moment, Vivian truly could not eat anymore, and only then did Mother finally realize that she might have fed her a bit too much. The Grand Duke thoughtfully handed over a napkin. Looking at Vivian with a face full of adoration, he said in an extremely gentle tone, "Vivian, don't force yourself." Seeing this son they had raised since childhood smile like this for the first time, the two parents nearly started doubting reality. At that point, the Grand Duke simply gave an order for them to leave. "Please stop fussing over Vivian. I'm taking her back to the room to rest." Mother waved a hand and said, "You're the more dangerous one, aren't you? Who knows what you'll do after taking her back to the bedroom?" Turning back, the Grand Duke said quite righteously, "Before we are married, I will not touch her. Tonight, I'm only letting her bathe and then sleep." Hearing that, Mother froze instantly. "What? You're letting her bathe? Even if you are my son, that's far too shameless, isn't it, husband?" Lucas could only silently drink tea at the side to ease the awkwardness. But in the next second, Mother suddenly changed her tune. "Haha, so that's it. Then don't wear Vivian out too much, Lennox." The scene shifted, and Vivian arrived at the bath, inwardly marveling at just how happy these past few days had been. She slowly untied her robe and was just about to sink comfortably into the bath. But right then, the door suddenly opened. It seemed the Grand Duke truly could not wait any longer and even wanted to directly arrange a bath together. Vivian was badly startled by the Grand Duke's sudden appearance. "Why, Your Grace, how can you suddenly come in like this?" The Grand Duke said, somewhat red-faced, that indeed, he should have knocked first before entering. The moment Vivian thought of what mother-in-law had said earlier, her mind instantly began screaming for help. In such a tense and impossibly ambiguous atmosphere, the two of them only exchanged a few simple words of concern. Only then did Vivian relax her guard a little. "So the Grand Duke only came to check whether I was feeling unwell." Right after that, the two of them returned to the bedroom. Vivian was so nervous that her heart was pounding as if it were about to jump out of her chest. The Grand Duke launched the first attack. "Don't worry, tonight I'll only hold your hand while we sleep." Then the Grand Duke unexpectedly added another line. Wasn't it just like in the novels Vivian wrote? Vivian instantly realized how serious the issue was and froze on the spot. It turned out that for 5 years, the Grand Duke had been thinking about what Vivian's reaction would be if he recited those lines from the novels to her in person. And when he truly saw Vivian making such an explosively adorable expression, he finally could not help laughing out loud. With a face full of disbelief, Vivian asked the Grand Duke what exactly he had just said. The Grand Duke wickedly winked at her. "The Imperial Grand Duke is my lover." Vivian's whole inner world exploded, and she could no longer hold her expression together. The Grand Duke, meanwhile, smiled beside her in complete satisfaction. It was even more intense than he had expected. Then he continued stabbing her with more lines from the novel. "You are my life and soul, my adorable one. I do not want to be apart from you for even a moment." Vivian collapsed straight to the floor. Wishing she could dig a hole and crawl into it on the spot, she shouted, Enough, stop here. Don't read anymore. The Grand Duke stood up and said that he had memorized every line in the novels. She looked at the Grand Duke with utter lifelessness. Why would you go memorize something that explosively embarrassing? That's too much. Originally, Vivian had always waited with hope, thinking that maybe one day she really could have a passionate romance with the Grand Duke, and she had always prayed that day would come. But now, looking back, all of it was nothing but dark history. The Grand Duke bent down to soothe her. All right, I understand. I won't tease you anymore. But if Vivian is willing to call me by a pet name. She immediately raised her head in annoyance. But the moment she saw the Grand Duke's face, she instantly lost all resistance. All she could do was blush deeply and softly say, "Enox." The Grand Duke seized the opportunity to keep teasing. What did you say? I can't hear you." Humiliated and angry, Vivian shouted out the pet name, and only then did the Grand Duke smile and pat her head in praise. Very well done. After that, the two of them lay down together under the covers. Looking at the puffed-up Vivian, he said, "Sorry, Vivian. What should I do for you to stop being angry? How about I sing you a lullaby?" She was a little surprised that the Grand Duke could even do that. Resting his chin in his hand, the Grand Duke looked at her affectionately. "For you, I'm willing to do anything." Accompanied by the Grand Duke's soft singing, Vivian slowly fell asleep. That night, although the Grand Duke did indeed keep his promise and only held her hand while sleeping, the next morning he actually started acting shameless. The Grand Duke directly lifted her into a bridal carry with one hand. Vivian immediately shouted, "Why are you taking me to the bath? Didn't you say you would endure until after marriage?" While carrying her toward the bath, the Grand Duke said as though nothing were wrong, "Did I say that? Wasn't it Vivian who wanted me to wash every corner of you clean?" Vivian struggled desperately.
What?
"I absolutely did not help, madam." But no matter how she struggled, it was completely useless. At that moment, however, the Grand Duke suddenly softened his voice and said, "All right, open your eyes." A dignified Grand Duke had actually gone and abducted a count's daughter. He had even arrogantly sent a letter saying that he would temporarily guarantee his daughter's personal safety and that for the details, they should discuss it face to face at the ducal residence. Cashin gripped that letter tightly in his hand. He opened his mouth and cursed, "That damned thief." So, what if he's the Grand Duke? Mother hurriedly reminded her son to calm down. Vivian would not be harmed, but Cashin was still full of anger. That bastard Lennox Glenn had better not already have done something to his sister. Though Cashin usually acted like he bullied his sister all the time, in truth he treasured her more than anyone else. It was just that Vivian herself had never noticed. And in the eyes of her parents, whether it was the gap in status or the possibility that Count Louis might be implicated in accusations, none of that was the most important thing. The most important person had always been Vivian. What met her eyes was a whole room full of dazzling jewels and dresses. The Grand Duke said, "I have already invited your family. First, you should choose a dress." But Vivian's mind had already been left reeling by everything that had happened yesterday. Faced with these dresses, so gorgeous they were almost absurd, she truly had no idea what to do for a moment. In the end, she randomly chose one of the dresses nearest to her, and as expected, the Grand Duke never missed a chance to praise his fiancée enthusiastically. Vivian really did have excellent taste. In the very next second, she was taken away by the maids to begin getting dressed up. After a long while, the little beauty, carefully dressed up, was finally ready. Even the Grand Duke standing to the side was stunned into silence. A little shyly, he turned his face away and had the maid bring out the ruby jewelry. Vivian was instantly both surprised and flattered, because this ruby necklace before her was clearly worth a fortune at a glance. Without the slightest hesitation, the Grand Duke presented this gift, which he had prepared long ago, to her. He even insisted on personally taking care of his fiancée. Looking at her slender, fair neck, the Grand Duke gently fastened the necklace on her. Vivian looked at the ruby shining at her collarbone, but hesitated inwardly. "Can I really wear something this expensive? It feels like it's worth more than my soul." The Grand Duke immediately refuted that compared to Vivian's soul, this necklace did not even count as dust. The Grand Duke's excessively earnest sweet talk instantly made Vivian blush. "I knew it. This necklace would definitely suit you perfectly. I should go get ready as well. Drink some tea and wait for me a little while, Vivian." After that, Vivian quietly sipped her tea. A life like this made her feel as though she had moved into a fairy tale. But when her gaze once again fell on the Grand Duke's figure, she still could not help sighing inwardly that the Grand Duke's body was simply too unfair. Then the Grand Duke turned around and, like a gentleman, extended his hand to her. "I'm finished. Let's go." In Vivian's eyes, the Grand Duke at that moment was practically glowing as if layered with 100,000 special effects. Faced with a Grand Duke that ridiculously pleasing to the eye, she almost started drooling. It was only when the Grand Duke called her name that Vivian suddenly snapped back to herself. The fact that she liked the Grand Duke seemed to have already become far too obvious to hide. The Grand Duke forcibly suppressed the surging thrill in his heart. "How adorable. If you keep looking at me like that, I really won't be able to stop myself from eating you up." At that moment, the butler knocked and announced, "Young master, The guests will be arriving soon. The Grand Duke had not expected his future father-in-law and mother-in-law to come so early. By then, Vivian and the Grand Duke had already prepared the tea and refreshments. Although the two of them were sitting there in an extremely embarrassing position, the Grand Duke's mother, Isabella, was the first to scold him. When the guests take their seats later, are you still planning to keep holding her like that? Won't she be uncomfortable? Is your own happiness all that matters? Then the Grand Duke lowered his head and asked her, Vivian, do you dislike being held by me? Blushing, she said softly, it's not like that. But in the very next second, she immediately denied it firmly. And no, I hate being held by the Grand Duke. The Grand Duke instantly put on a pitiful, puppy-like expression. Has Vivian already started hating me? She hurriedly explained, it's not like that. I just don't want you holding me in a situation like this. Mother's sharp gaze and father's round-eyed stare both remained fixed tightly on the two of them. Lowering her voice, Mother said to her husband that the only one who could tame Lennox really was that young lady, and that he thought so too. Didn't he? Father Lucas nodded in agreement as well. It seemed their daughter-in-law truly could only be Vivian. At that moment, the carriage had already arrived, and the person inside, it was Vivian's friend Marina. Well, to be honest, I'm actually a little shocked right now. I'd heard about it before, but I never imagined Grand Duke Glenn's residence would be this magnificent. Her younger brother Cashin immediately shouted angrily, why did you come too? Marina turned her head away and said, Vivian's business is my business. Meanwhile, the expressions of the parents on the other side were not good. Cashin secretly made up his mind. Lennox Glenn, I absolutely will not forgive you. If anything happens to my sister, I'll kill that bastard first and then go to prison. The scene shifted, and the butler announced that Count Louis and his family had arrived. Seeing that the future in-laws had come, the older couple immediately went to receive them. As the great doors slowly opened, tears instantly welled up in Vivian's eyes. She hurried over and threw herself toward her family, and tightly embraced her father. Seeing his sister show such a pitiful expression, Cashin trembled with rage, and in the very next second directly cursed, you bastard. At this moment, Cashin no longer cared about any difference in status. Even if he ended up being dragged away afterward, he would absolutely protect his sister. He suddenly grabbed the Grand Duke by the collar and roared furiously at him, you actually made my sister cry. The moment Vivian heard that, she immediately rushed forward to stop him. Stop it, Cashin. This is all a misunderstanding. Because I like the Grand Duke, I let myself be kidnapped by him willingly, and the Grand Duke can do anything he wants to me. The moment those words left her mouth, her younger brother Cashin began trembling all over. He simply could not accept that the precious cabbage his family had raised so carefully was really about to be taken by a pig. Sis, are you really planning to marry the Grand Duke? How is that even possible? He'll definitely treat you carelessly and then throw you away. Cashin knew how hurtful those words were, but for his sister's sake, he could only say them. The moment he said that, the Grand Duke's expression darkened instantly. Even the air around them seemed to turn colder. What do you mean by that? Future brother-in-law. The Grand Duke's gaze locked firmly onto him, but seeing the Grand Duke react like that, Cashin instead wavered slightly. Bastard. What kind of reaction is that? Don't tell me you're serious? Do you really like my sister? But that somehow just makes it even more irritating. How annoying. Then the Grand Duke gently placed a hand on Vivian's shoulder. Young master of Count Louis's house, let me make this clear right now. I intend to formally marry your sister. After those words were spoken, Cashin gradually began to accept this future brother-in-law. If it was Grand Duke Glenn, then perhaps he truly would not let anyone hurt his sister. Perhaps he really could protect her. Cashin still wanted to confirm once more whether his attitude was sincere. Really? Do you dare swear it on your life? The Grand Duke answered without the slightest hesitation. My life has long since belonged to Vivian. Those excessively affectionate words left even Vivian herself stunned. At that moment, the butler invited everyone to take their seats. Seeing how irrational Cashin had been just now, Mother could only step forward and remind him to mind his manners. And although the Grand Duke still looked cold on the surface, inwardly, he was actually quite pleased with this future brother-in-law. Cashin, luckily you are not a coward. I hear you are practicing swordsmanship. Perhaps I could give you a few pointers. At that moment, the two fathers also began formally exchanging greetings, introducing their respective family members to one another. Naturally, that also included Vivian's friend Marina. The Grand Duke's mother quickly noticed that she was a mage, because she herself was originally a spirit master and was especially sensitive to the flow of magic. So the two of them quickly launched into a round of mutually flattering compliments. This absurdly harmonious atmosphere was so natural that it felt as though they had always been one family already. Marina was probably starting to forget that she had originally come to look after Vivian. Meanwhile, the Grand Duke and Vivian on the other side were still living in a world of only the two of them, and even Cashin was about to be overwhelmed by the sour smell of romance. At that point, Isabella brought up the matter of the eldest prince using black magic. Marina explained that Count Louis had really only been used, and in order to prove that he was not guilty, She had specially erased the residual traces of black magic. Isabella appreciated Marina more and more inwardly. To think our Vivian has such a wonderful friend. There is truly not a single flaw to be found. Marina, meanwhile, could not help complaining inwardly. Vivian, what exactly did you do to Isabella? No, rather, how exactly did you manage to tame this whole family of 3 demons? Marina was actually still somewhat worried, although it was true that Vivian would be safe under the Grand Duke's protection. If this matter spread to the imperial capital, it would definitely stir up an enormous uproar. With so many noble young ladies admiring the Grand Duke, would Vivian really be able to walk safely down such a thorn-filled path? Vivian, although you can be a little naive sometimes, you also have a strong and perceptive side. You will definitely make it through. Besides, once a madman falls in love, doesn't he become even more terrifying? Although taming a madman is bound to be hard, this is also the path Vivian herself chose. So, do your best. At that moment, Marina said, I have something I want to show you all. Then the magic in her hand slowly spread out around them. The Grand Duke's mother, Elizabeth, praised her from the side. To be able to create a space like this, your ability is already quite outstanding. You are truly a young and talented lady. Vivian also stood nearby, with a face full of admiration. Marina said that the documents inside the magical space were the evidence. There was the bag that had contained the black magic bead, and the papers were records of the magic research. The moment they heard the words black magic, Vivian's family could not help feeling a wave of lingering fear. Marina asked her if she remembered that black bead. The magic inside the bead was called evil temptation. It was a kind of mental enchantment that magnified a person's malice to the extreme. The reason you kidnapped the Grand Duke was very likely because you were influenced by that black magic. According to these materials, Kelsani was a mage at Asmodeus' side because Marina and she attended the same academy. The original plan had actually been to use Marina to harm the Grand Duke, but in the end, the one who opened the bag became Vivian. The Grand Duke's father, Lucas, said gravely from the side, as expected, that's how it was. Vivian lowered her head and blamed herself, wondering how she could have been so careless. After noticing her mood, the Grand Duke immediately comforted her and told her not to take it to heart, because all of this was caused by that bastard Asmodeus, and Vivian had done nothing wrong. Hearing their son say this, the Grand Duke's parents also felt relieved. Sure enough, the only person who could make their son this serious and attentive was Vivian. But where some were pleased, someone was always bound to worry. Vivian's family kept feeling that something about the scene was not quite right. Her younger brother Cashin said unhappily, "Stop showing off your love in front of other people." The Grand Duke replied as if it were only natural, "We're practically about to get married. What's wrong with expressing affection to this extent?" Her brother immediately stood up and roared, "You're not married yet." Their mother quickly pulled her son back from the side, but Cashin still angrily declared that it was obviously that guy who had provoked him first. The Grand Duke even smugly said something about the future brother-in-law being upset because his sister had been stolen away. The moment those words left his mouth, justice descended from above, and the Grand Duke's mother directly smacked him. Cashin and his mother were both shocked by the sight. Elizabeth smiled awkwardly and apologized. "My son is really far too arrogant." Vivian asked somewhat worriedly whether her family's suspicion had already been cleared. Elizabeth immediately affirmed, "Of course, darling. We never doubted Count Louis in the first place." Yet inwardly, her feelings had grown somewhat complicated, because Asmodeus was the royal family's only legitimate son. He had even taught me when I was young, and he had always both respected me and obeyed me, but he was completely different toward my son. Alongside the jealousy, there was also a trace of sadness. It was almost as if he always took pleasure in bullying Lennox. Although it would be enough just to ignore him, if he were to discover that Lennox now had a beloved, what extreme thing might he do then? After gathering her thoughts again, Vivian's family also prepared to say goodbye here. But at that moment, Elizabeth suddenly called out to Vivian. "Wait, Vivian, could you stay and talk with me for a little while?" With a smile, Elizabeth said that after she and Lennox got engaged, they should go shopping together, eat delicious food, and happily spend time that belonged just to them. In the next second, this future mother-in-law sighed lightly with a trace of regret. "If you feel burdened, though, I can understand that too." But this was clearly exactly the sort of thing Vivian had always longed for in her heart. She immediately clenched her little fists in excitement and expressed her joy with a face full of delight. This was simply too wonderful. Isabella was completely struck by how adorable her future daughter-in-law looked. Hugging her almost like a cat, she kept ruffling her hair and said, "Goodness, just how did my abstinent son manage to marry such a cute wife?" At that moment, the Grand Duke suddenly appeared behind the door and asked, "Vivian, what are you talking about with Mother?" A little embarrassed, she stammered out a few words.
"What?
Let's go back to the room and talk." Seeing that Vivian was unexpectedly being so proactive today, the Grand Duke immediately swept her up into his arms. "All right, then let's hurry and go now." Vivian struggled a little and said she could go back to the room by herself. After all, She truly did not want her whole family to see her in such an embarrassing position. Before Vivian could fully refuse, the Grand Duke immediately seized the chance and began coaxing her. "If mother is allowed to touch you like this, why can't I? There are so many stairs. If you walk by yourself, your legs will hurt. So let me carry you. That way we'll get back to the room faster." Vivian also tried to be clever and said, "I ought to get some exercise and work on my health, shouldn't I?" She had originally wanted to use that as an excuse to escape, but how could the Grand Duke possibly let go of a chance like this to carry her back? Then, with a perfectly natural expression, he said, "Exercising in bed is fine too." Pouting, she demanded of the Grand Duke, "The fact that you've never been in love before, was that a lie?" The Grand Duke pretended to be innocent and said, "Haven't I been in love once with Vivian?" Her face turning bright red, she shoved him away. "No, before me, you must have dated someone. Otherwise, how could you be this good at flirting?" The Grand Duke could not bear to keep teasing his fiancée any longer. So, smiling as he spoke, he said, "You've chased after me for 7 years. You should know me better than anyone." Then the two of them went up the stairs together. But just as the two were flirting with each other, Vivian's mother suddenly appeared in front of them. Seeing the gloomy expression on her mother's face, Vivian quickly stepped forward to ease the atmosphere. "Mother, the Grand Duchess said there will be a dinner banquet tonight. What flavors do you prefer? And doesn't Cashin dislike food with a strong fishy smell?" She had wanted to hurry and change the subject, but at that moment, her mother snapped her fan shut with a smack. "You two aren't married yet. Are you already sleeping in the same room now?" Vivian's expression instantly became troubled. The Grand Duke, however, said with complete seriousness, "I will protect Vivian well." But Vivian's mother was clearly not so easily persuaded. Her mother asked again, "Are your feelings for my daughter sincere?" And the Grand Duke gave an affirmative answer without the slightest hesitation. Only then did her mother reluctantly believe the words of this future son-in-law. In the next second, she directly grabbed Vivian's hand. "But you two cannot stay in the same room. If you are sincere, then you ought to be able to endure it until after marriage." The Grand Duke lowered his head and said humbly, "Of course, mother-in-law." Then she prepared to take her daughter away. Seeing the Grand Duke lower himself so much before her, Mother also understood in her heart that he truly did like Vivian very much, and she was just about to turn and leave. But Vivian suddenly shook free of her mother's hand and quickly ran over to the Grand Duke. She wrapped her arms around his neck, stood on tiptoe, and planted a kiss on him with a smack. The Grand Duke had never expected Vivian to be this proactive in front of her mother-in-law. That only made him want to be separated from Vivian for not even 1 second. Hugging him, Vivian said, "Rest well. I'll see you at the banquet." The Grand Duke replied, "All right, I love you, Vivian." Just like that, after the two of them parted, the Grand Duke lowered his head and pressed a hand to his forehead. Only one thought remained in his mind now, and that was to get married as soon as possible. Vivian, meanwhile, lay leisurely on the bed in a daze. But despite having been apart for only such a short while, she had already started missing the Grand Duke again. A girl lovesick like this would probably feel a little unwell both mentally and physically. As soon as she closed her eyes, she would think of the Grand Duke's face. His voice also kept replaying in her mind. Her younger brother Cashin looked at his sister speechlessly from the side. "Sis, what exactly do you even like about him? When you're in danger, he won't even show up in time. He's obviously just a man with a terrible personality." Vivian angrily raised her little fist. "Our Grand Duke is obviously super handsome, the fastest and strongest man in the whole empire. No, in the whole world." His sister clearly looked as though she had already fallen completely. Her brother immediately covered his ears. "That's enough, sis. Stop talking." Right after that, the maids came in and began dressing her and doing her hair. From head to toe, there was not the slightest bit of carelessness in it. And so, a delicate and charming young lady was freshly unveiled. She entered the banquet hall together with her family. While she was still marveling at how splendid the banquet was, she suddenly discovered that the Grand Duke was standing across from her, and the moment their eyes met, her heart once again began pounding helplessly out of control. Marina stood nearby, watching the two of them greeting each other from afar, and was nearly overwhelmed by the sweetness. Vivian had truly fallen completely into love this time. The Grand Duke lowered his eyes and gazed deeply at his beloved. "You're too adorable, Vivian. I really want to take you away and hide you somewhere where there's only the two of us." Her younger brother Cashin simply could not stand this kind of public display of affection, so he immediately stepped forward to cause trouble. "Don't block the way. Move aside." Her brother also immediately put on a stern air. "You should behave properly in front of the Grand Duke." Before Cashin had even finished speaking, the Grand Duke had already pulled Vivian into his arms. "It's all right, Vivian." Her attitude instantly changed, and she affectionately called the Grand Duke by name. Her brother shouted from the side, "Don't act like I'm invisible." But the two of them had already sunk into a world that contained only each other. "Grand Duke, please call me by a pet name." "All right, Vivi. I'm really happy that you like me. That's truly wonderful." At this point, there was no longer room in either of their eyes for anyone else. Cashin looked as though he was on the verge of collapse. "Please, anyone, hurry and separate them." At that moment, the Grand Duke's mother Isabella appeared. "Leave it to me." Then, with a single "darling," she instantly called Vivian away. The Grand Duke looked utterly baffled. How had his beloved been stolen so easily by his mother? Mother and son immediately began fighting with their eyes on the spot. No matter how one thought about it, Vivian could only belong to her son alone. What a pity. The Grand Duke, meanwhile, refused to yield in the slightest. Was that really something a mother ought to say? Vivian could only obediently remain caught between her future husband and future mother-in-law. And under this pressure, from both sides. At that moment, the Grand Duke's father Lucas appeared just in time. He directly picked Vivian up from her seat and placed her between himself and his wife. Who would have thought that Lucas, too, would join the battlefield to compete with his son over his future daughter-in-law? Vivian was completely bewildered. What exactly is going on? Am I really allowed to just sit here like this? Meanwhile, Vivian's own father looked utterly miserable. If anyone can sit anywhere they like, then should my daughter be sitting beside me? His wife, meanwhile, tried to calm him from the side. The Grand Duke also could not sit still any longer and said aggrievedly, "Why is my fiancé being taken away by father? Vivian's place is obviously by my side." Mother Isabella teased, "That's enough. If this goes on, Vivian is going to get indigestion." The Grand Duke said unwillingly that mother was the one who had started it in the first place. At that moment, Lucas stepped in and raised a thumbs up. As the son, you should admit defeat. And so, with Lucas's forceful intervention, this battle came to a temporary end. Then, he started enthusiastically recommending all kinds of food to his future daughter-in-law and even wanted to feed her personally. Mother followed right after, stuffing bite after bite into her mouth as well. Caught in the middle, Vivian's mouth was practically full of food. But at that moment, Vivian suddenly choked. Anxious to drink something, she grabbed the glass beside her and brought it straight to her lips. Just as everyone else was about to remind her that it wasn't water, it was already too late. She gulped the wine down in one swallow, and in the next second, she looked like she was about to breathe fire. The burn so strong she could not even keep her eyes open. The elderly couple sitting beside her immediately panicked. Everyone instantly grew tense and crowded around to take care of her. And yet in the corner, there was one lonely little soul who had perfectly missed his chance to step in. Vivian only felt the whole world spinning around her, and the only thought in her mind was that she wanted to see the Grand Duke. Before the Grand Duke could even squeeze through the crowd, Vivian had already angrily shouted his name. With her absurdly terrible alcohol tolerance, she ran all the way over, and in the next second, she threw herself straight into the Grand Duke's arms. That cherry-like little mouth of hers kept leaning forward insistently. "Why won't you kiss me?" The Grand Duke also fell into intense internal struggle. In front of the family, no matter what, he had to suppress his desires first. No, Vivian." Then, pitifully, she pressed down on the Grand Duke's head and asked, "Why not?" The Grand Duke forced himself to say, "Not now. Later. You can do whatever you want to me." But by now, she was already completely woozy. Curled up in the Grand Duke's arms, she waved her little fists in protest and complained that she wasn't talking about an ordinary kiss. She wanted a real tongue kiss. The Grand Duke immediately panicked. "Vivian, you're drunk. Go to sleep first, all right?" She still kept trying to argue that she wasn't drunk at all. Lennox Glenn, idiot. But the family members beside them were not taking it nearly so lightly. Hit head-on by this overwhelming display of sweetness, they were all completely speechless. Then the Grand Duke swept them with a threatening look, as though silently declaring that only he was allowed to witness scenes like this. In the next second, the three of them immediately looked away in perfect tacit agreement and forcibly changed the subject. Vivian continued making a fuss in his arms for quite a while. For a moment, Lennox was simply at a complete loss for words. Once this girl lost her reason, how did she somehow become even bolder? It was driving him mad in every possible way. He let out a deep sigh and said, "Vivian is drunk right now, so let her go to sleep first." "What? No, I'm not. I'm not drunk." The words drunk instantly ignited her emotions, and she began making a scene on the spot. Then she shouted again, "Lennox Glenn, idiot. Helpless. The Grand Duke could only threaten her in a low voice. "Vivian, if you keep behaving like this, I'll keep calling you Rabbit from now on." Father Lucas at the side was rather puzzled by the nickname Rabbit. His wife Isabella explained that it was because Vivian looked like a rabbit, so she had become their bunny wife. Yet the moment the Grand Duke had just said the word rabbit, Vivian angrily rammed her head straight into him. "Not Rabbit, then, Vivian?" The moment she heard her own name, she immediately obediently nodded in agreement. The family members behind them could only look on speechlessly. These two really were rather practiced at this. From the Grand Duke's point of view, Vivian was practically a living work of art. Her rose gold hair fell over her rounded forehead, her flushed cheeks, her hazy dreamlike eyes, and her slightly parted pink lips. To the Grand Duke, she was the cutest and most dangerous creature in this world. How much longer am I supposed to keep enduring this? Lennox thought from the bottom of his heart. But in everyone else's eyes, Vivian was simply a spoiled young lady causing trouble when drunk. After confirming that Vivian had fallen asleep, Mother firmly locked the room. This room could not be opened from the outside at all, and a sleeping Vivian obviously could not come running out again in the middle of the night. So there was no need to worry about that sort of thing between a man and a woman. Annetta let out a long breath of relief, and then could not help recalling her own sweet memories from her younger days. Meanwhile, the Grand Duke also prepared to return to his room to rest. Faced with Vivian's string of fierce assaults today, it was less that his body was tired, and more that his mind had been thoroughly tormented. It had already been exhausting enough driving away all the people who had approached Vivian over the years. But who could have imagined that the most dangerous enemies would actually be his own parents? The Grand Duke silently decided that no matter the occasion in the future, she absolutely had to sit beside me. I will have her all to myself. Once he lay down in bed, Lennox quickly fell asleep, but not long after, he suddenly felt a warm breath against him. Wait, warm breathing. He abruptly opened his eyes. What entered his sight was a fluffy head of golden hair. Even in the darkness, that distinctive pink tint was still clearly visible. He recognized at a glance the unexpected sleeping intruder who had woken him up. "Vivian, why are you here?" And when he realized that Vivian was still drunk, he practically went mad. Lennox panicked in an instant, never expecting that she would actually come stumbling drunk into his room. He carefully tried to wake Vivian. "Go back and sleep, or Countess Lewis will scold you." But Vivian rejected him the moment she opened her mouth, insisting that she had to sleep with the Grand Duke. The Grand Duke's inner restraint was almost at its breaking point.